A poor girl bought coffee for a stranger in a wheelchair with nothing but kindness. She had no idea he was a CEO desperately searching for his missing fiancée, and she was about to become the center of his story. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The morning frost clung to the windows of Maggie's small apartment as she quickly prepared for her shift at the local diner. Her breath formed small clouds in the unheated room. Another month behind on utilities. Another series of apologetic calls to make. At 24, Maggie Collins had become an expert at stretching dollars beyond their limits, at smiling through the gnawing worry about how to make rent, at promising herself that someday things would be different. She pulled on her faded blue uniform, the fabric worn thin from countless washes, and glanced at the small stack of unpaid medical bills on her kitchen counter. Her mother's cancer treatments had drained what little savings she had managed to accumulate, and though she'd been gone for almost a year now, the debt remained, a constant reminder of what Maggie had lost. "Just keep swimming," she whispered to herself, a mantra borrowed from her mother's favorite movie. It was what Catherine Collins had always said during her toughest days, and Maggie clung to those words like a lifeline. Outside, the November air bit at her cheeks as she hurried toward the bus stop. Maggie couldn't afford to be late again. Greta, the diner manager, had already given her 2 warnings this month. The early morning commuters huddled together, all avoiding eye contact, their faces illuminated by phone screens. Maggie checked her own phone, an older model with a cracked screen, to confirm she had enough time. When the bus finally arrived, she squeezed into the crowded vehicle, grabbing onto a handrail as the doors closed and the bus lurched forward. Through the window, she watched the city transition from her rundown neighborhood to the gleaming downtown district where Sunshine Diner was located, an uncomfortable juxtaposition of poverty and prosperity that defined Westlake City. The diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main, a retro-style establishment popular with both locals and the business crowd from the surrounding corporate offices. Maggie pushed through the back entrance exactly 3 minutes before her shift began. "Cutting it close again, Collins," Greta said, not looking up from the schedule she was adjusting. "Sorry, the bus was running late," Maggie replied, tying her apron around her waist. Greta, a stern woman in her 50s with graying hair and perpetually pursed lips, finally glanced up. Her expression softened slightly. "Table 7 needs coffee refills. And smile more today. Tips were down yesterday." Maggie nodded, forcing her lips into what she hoped was a convincing smile. Tips were her lifeline, the difference between making rent or facing eviction. She grabbed the coffee pot and headed into the dining area, navigating the maze of tables with practiced ease. The morning rush was in full swing, business people tapping away on laptops, construction workers fueling up before their shifts, and the regular elderly customers who came for the company as much as the food. Maggie moved efficiently, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, and delivering plates of steaming food. She had learned long ago that in this job, invisibility was a virtue. Present enough to meet needs, invisible enough to not disturb conversations. By 10 o'clock, the rush had subsided to a steady trickle of customers. Maggie was wiping down a recently vacated table when the bell above the door chimed. She turned to see a man in a wheelchair maneuvering through the entrance, struggling slightly with the heavy door. Without hesitation, she moved to help him. "Let me get that for you," she said, holding the door wide. "Thank you," the man replied, his voice surprisingly deep and clear. As he wheeled past her, Maggie caught a glimpse of his face, striking blue eyes set in a handsome face that seemed at odds with the weariness etched into it. He was well-dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and expensive-looking shoes, with dark hair that showed slight touches of silver at the temples, despite him appearing to be only in his mid-30s. "Table for one?" she asked. He nodded, and she led him to a corner table that was easier to access with the wheelchair. "Coffee to start?" Maggie offered, placing a menu in front of him. "Please." The man barely looked at her, his attention caught by something outside the window. Maggie filled his cup and moved on to her other tables, but she found herself glancing back at him periodically. There was something about him, an intensity, a sadness perhaps, that seemed out of place in the cheerful diner. He hadn't touched his menu, instead staring out the window at passers-by on the street, his coffee cooling untouched before him. When she returned to check on him 15 minutes later, the coffee was still full and the menu remained closed. "Would you like to order something?" she asked gently. He seemed startled, as if he'd forgotten where he was. "I'm sorry, what?" "Food," Maggie said with a patient smile. "Would you like to order some food?" "Just the coffee is fine," he replied, finally picking up the cup. His hands, she noticed, were those of someone unaccustomed to physical labor. Neat nails, smooth skin, but with a slight tremor she wouldn't have expected in someone his age. "You haven't touched it. Would you like a fresh cup?" He looked down at the coffee as if seeing it for the first time. "Yes, that would be... Thank you." As Maggie replaced his cold coffee with a fresh cup, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the slight hollowness in his cheeks. This was a man who hadn't been sleeping or eating properly. She recognized the signs all too well. They mirrored what she'd seen in her own reflection during her mother's final months. "The blueberry muffins are fresh today," she said on impulse. "Best in the city according to our regulars." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Is that so?" "Cross my heart," Maggie replied, making the childish gesture before she could stop herself. "They're still warm from the oven." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. One muffin, then." Maggie returned with the pastry moments later, setting it before him along with extra napkins and butter. "Enjoy," she said, turning to leave. "Wait," he called softly. When she turned back, he asked, "What's your name?" "Maggie," she answered, touching the name tag on her uniform. He looked embarrassed. "Of course, I'm sorry." "No worries," she said lightly. "And you are?" For a moment, she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Alexander. Alex Whitaker." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Maggie couldn't place it. "Nice to meet you, Alex. Enjoy your muffin." Throughout the next hour, Maggie kept an eye on Alex. He ate half the muffin in small, deliberate bites, as if forcing himself to consume calories his body needed but his mind rejected. Occasionally, he would check his phone, his expression darkening each time before he set it down again. Twice she refilled his coffee without being asked, receiving a distracted "thank you" in response. At noon, the lunch crowd began to filter in, and Maggie was once again swept up in the rhythm of orders, deliveries, and payments. When she next had a moment to breathe, she realized Alex was still at his table, now with papers spread out before him, his coffee cup empty again. She approached with the pot. "Refill?" He looked up, seeming surprised that she was still there. "Yes, please." As she poured, he gathered his papers, which she now saw were printouts of what looked like security camera footage, grainy images of a parking garage, timestamps visible in the corners. "Working on something interesting?" she asked conversationally. Alex quickly slid the papers into a leather portfolio. "Just reviewing some security footage. Are you a police officer?" It would explain the intensity, the exhaustion in his eyes. "No," he replied simply, offering no further explanation. Then, seeming to realize his abruptness, he added, "I'm looking for someone." Before Maggie could respond, a loud crash came from the kitchen, followed by shouting. Greta appeared at the service window, gesturing urgently. "Maggie, need your help back here." "Excuse me," Maggie said to Alex, hurrying toward the kitchen. Inside, she found chaos. A delivery person had knocked over a stack of dishes while bringing in supplies, and one of the cooks had slipped on the wet floor, cutting his hand on the broken ceramic. "First aid kit," Greta commanded, and Maggie rushed to retrieve it from the office. The next 20 minutes were spent cleaning up the mess, bandaging the cook's hand and reordering the kitchen. By the time Maggie emerged back into the dining area, Alex's table was empty, a $20 bill placed under his coffee cup for a tab that couldn't have been more than $8. Maggie pocketed the generous tip with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity about the mysterious man. As she cleared his table, she noticed a business card left beside the plate with the half-eaten muffin. It was simple and elegant. Alexander Whitaker, CEO, Whitaker Industries, with a phone number underneath. She tucked it into her apron pocket without much thought, assuming he had left it accidentally. The rest of her shift passed in the usual blur of customers, orders, and cleaning. By the time Maggie clocked out at 7 that evening, her feet were aching and her back was stiff from hours of standing and carrying heavy trays. The November night had turned even colder, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself as she waited for the bus. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her roommate, Jen. "Heading out with Tony tonight. Don't wait up." Maggie sighed. Another night of having the apartment to herself, which would have been nice if the heating worked properly. At least Jen had paid her share of the rent this month, even if utilities remained a challenge. The bus was late, and Maggie stamped her feet against the cold, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air. When the vehicle finally arrived, it was nearly empty, a small mercy after the packed morning commute. She sank into a seat, leaning her head against the window as the city lights blurred past. Home was a 2-bedroom apartment in a building that had seen better days. The elevator was perpetually out of order, forcing Maggie to climb 4 flights of stairs. By the time she reached her door, her legs were trembling with fatigue. Inside, the apartment was as cold as she'd feared. Maggie turned on the space heater in her bedroom, her one splurge from last month's tips, and changed into sweatpants and a thick sweater. In the kitchen, she heated up leftover soup from the night before and carried the steaming bowl to her small desk in the corner of the living room. Opening her laptop, she logged into her online classes. She was halfway through a business administration degree, taking night courses at the local community college. Between her full-time job at the diner and caring for her mother during her illness, it had taken Maggie 6 years to get this far. But she was determined to finish. Education was her ticket out of poverty, her mother had always insisted. As she began working on an assignment, Maggie's mind wandered back to the man in the wheelchair, Alex Whitaker. Something about his name nagged at her memory. On impulse, she opened a new browser tab and typed his name into the search engine. The results made her eyes widen. Alexander Whitaker was not just any CEO. He was one of the wealthiest men in the state, the head of a technology empire that specialized in communication systems and security software. His company employed thousands and was valued at billions. But what caught Maggie's attention was a more recent headline. Tech mogul's fiancé missing, police investigation ongoing. The article, dated just 2 weeks ago, detailed the mysterious disappearance of Eliza Bennett, the 30-year-old fiancée of Alexander Whitaker. She had last been seen leaving their penthouse apartment to meet a friend for lunch, but had never arrived at the restaurant. Her car had been found in a shopping center parking garage, but there was no sign of Eliza herself. The article mentioned that Whitaker was offering a substantial reward for information leading to her whereabouts. A more recent update noted that Whitaker had been injured in a car accident while pursuing leads in his fiancée's disappearance, resulting in temporary paralysis from which doctors expected him to recover. Maggie sat back, soup forgotten as pieces clicked into place. The security camera footage, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he had scanned the faces of passers-by outside the diner window. Alexander Whitaker hadn't been in the diner for the food or coffee. He'd been watching for his missing fiancée. With new understanding, Maggie pulled out the business card she'd tucked into her pocket. The simple white rectangle seemed to carry more weight now that she knew the story behind the man who had left it. Suddenly, Maggie remembered something. A blonde woman who had come into the diner about 2 weeks ago, clearly distressed, asking to use the phone because her cell had died. Maggie had let her use the diner's landline, and the woman had made a brief call before hurrying out again. Was it possible? Could that have been Eliza Bennett? Maggie pulled up an image of the missing woman from one of the news articles. The resemblance to the woman she remembered was striking, though not conclusive. The diner didn't have security cameras, so there would be no footage to confirm her suspicion. She glanced at the business card again, wondering if she should call the number. What would she say? "Hello, Mr. Whitaker. I think your missing fiancé might have been in our diner 2 weeks ago." It sounded absurd, potentially cruel to give him false hope based on such a vague recollection. And yet, if there was even a chance… Maggie's phone buzzed again. Another text from Jen. "Forgot to tell you, rent's going up next month. Landlord left notice." Maggie's heart sank. Another $100 a month they couldn't afford, another impossibility to somehow make possible. She looked back at the business card, at the article about the missing woman, at the notification of her overdue tuition payment flashing on her laptop screen. Then she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would approach Alexander Whitaker again. She would tell him what she remembered, offer whatever help she could give. Not for the reward money, she told herself firmly, though the thought had admittedly crossed her mind, but because if it were her loved one missing, she would want every possible lead investigated, no matter how small. Setting aside her schoolwork, Maggie began writing down everything she could remember about the blonde woman's visit to the diner, what she had worn, what time of day it had been, any details of the phone call she might have overheard. By the time she finished, it was well past midnight, and her eyes were heavy with fatigue. As she finally crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin to ward off the persistent chill, Maggie had no way of knowing that her decision would irrevocably change the course of her life, that the simple act of compassion she planned for the next day would draw her into a web of secrets, danger, and unexpected connection that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. Maggie barely slept that night, her mind churning with thoughts of the missing woman and the weary-eyed man in the wheelchair. When her alarm blared at 5 a.m., she was already awake, rehearsing what she would say if Alexander Whitaker returned to the diner. The apartment was freezing, her breath visible in the dim light as she dressed. Jen still hadn't returned, but that wasn't unusual. Her roommate often stayed out for days at a time with her boyfriend, Tony, a man Maggie instinctively distrusted. Today, she arrived at the bus stop 15 minutes early, huddled against the bitter wind. She couldn't risk being late, not when there was a chance Whitaker might return to the diner. The bus arrived on schedule, and Maggie found herself anxiously watching the streets passing by, wondering if she was making a mistake. What if her recollection was wrong? What if she gave this man false hope? Greta barely looked up when Maggie arrived. "You're early," she noted with mild surprise. "Take over from Luis on the grill. He's been here since midnight." Maggie's heart sank. She'd been hoping to work the front, where she could watch for Whitaker. "Actually, Greta, I was wondering if I could stay on tables today. I'm expecting someone." Greta raised an eyebrow. Her curiosity piqued. "A date? At 6 a.m.? "No, nothing like that," Maggie said quickly. "Just someone who might have information about my mother's medical bills." The lie came easily, surprising even herself. Greta's expression softened slightly. She knew about Maggie's mother, knew about the mountain of debt. "Fine, but if the lunch rush gets crazy, you're on backup for the kitchen." "Thank you," Maggie said sincerely, tying her apron and grabbing a coffee pot. The morning passed agonizingly slowly. Every time the bell above the door chimed, Maggie's head snapped up, hope quickly fading when it wasn't him. By 11, she had begun to think he wouldn't come back at all. Why would he? A busy CEO probably had countless resources at his disposal for finding his fiancée. He didn't need the vague recollections of a waitress. The lunch rush came, and Greta called Maggie to help in the kitchen. With one last glance at the door, she reluctantly headed back, trading her order pad for an apron that would protect her uniform from grease splatters. She was assembling club sandwiches when Greta appeared at her side. "Your guy's here," she said quietly. "Wheelchair, right? Table 12. Maggie's heart leapt. "Yes, can I?" Greta took the knife from her hand. "Go, but make it quick." Maggie hastily wiped her hands on a towel and pushed through the swinging doors into the dining area. Alexander Whitaker sat at a table near the window, just as he had the day before. Today he wore a navy suit, his dark hair neatly combed, but the same exhaustion shadowed his eyes. Taking a deep breath, Maggie approached. "Mr. Whitaker?" He looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Maggie, right? The waitress with the excellent muffin recommendations." She smiled, nervously fidgeting with her apron. "That's me. I hope you don't mind, but I found your business card and I looked you up." His expression darkened slightly. "I see. And now you know who I am." "Yes," she admitted. "And about your fiancé." At the mention of Eliza, Alex's entire demeanor changed. The polite mask slipped, revealing raw pain underneath. "What about her?" Maggie glanced around the busy diner, aware this wasn't the place for such a conversation. "I think I might have seen her. About 2 weeks ago, here in the diner." Alex's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles whitening. "You're certain?" "Not completely," Maggie admitted. "But the woman I remember matches her description and the timing fits. She was upset, said her phone had died, and asked to use our landline." "Did you hear who she called?" His voice was tightly controlled, but Maggie could sense the desperation beneath. "No, I couldn't make out the conversation, but she seemed frightened. After the call, she left in a hurry." Alex closed his eyes briefly, processing this information. When he opened them again, they were clear and focused. "I need to know everything you remember, every detail, no matter how insignificant it might seem." Maggie glanced back at the kitchen, where orders were piling up. "I'm supposed to be helping with the lunch rush." "I'll speak with your manager," Alex said decisively, already reaching for his phone. "Your information could be crucial." "No, please," Maggie said quickly. "I can't afford to cause problems here. I need this job." He studied her face, seeming to truly see her for the first time. The worry lines, the tired eyes, the fraying uniform. "What time do you finish?" 7 tonight. "I'll wait. We can talk then." It wasn't a question. Maggie nodded, acutely aware of Greta watching from the service window. "I should get back to work." "Of course." Alex handed her a $50 bill. "For the coffee I'll be drinking while I wait." Maggie wanted to refuse the money. It felt somehow improper. But the thought of next month's rent increase stopped her. "Thank you. I'll bring your coffee right away." Throughout the afternoon, Maggie was acutely aware of Alex's presence. He alternated between working on his laptop and making phone calls, occasionally looking up to scan the faces of customers entering the diner. Twice, Maggie refilled his coffee without being asked. Each time, he thanked her with distracted courtesy, his mind clearly elsewhere. At 6:45, with the dinner rush winding down, Greta approached Maggie as she wiped down tables. "Your friend's been here all day," she said, nodding toward Alex. "Important guy based on those calls he's been making." "We're just talking about a mutual acquaintance," Maggie said vaguely. Greta's eyes narrowed. "You know I don't like trouble in my diner, Maggie." "It's nothing like that, I promise." Greta studied her for a moment longer, then sighed. "Go clock out. Whatever this is, handle it outside." "Thank you," Maggie said, relieved. She hurried to the back, removed her apron, and collected her things from her locker. When she emerged, Alex was waiting by the door, having already settled his bill. "There's a cafe across the street," he said as they stepped outside into the cold evening air. "More private than the diner." Maggie nodded, suddenly nervous. In the harsh light of day, her recollections seemed flimsy, possibly meaningless. What if she was wasting this man's time? Or worse, giving him false hope? The cafe was upscale with soft lighting and plush seating. Maggie felt out of place in her worn uniform, but Alex wheeled directly to a corner table without seeming to notice the curious glances they received. "Order whatever you'd like," he said, gesturing to the menu. "I imagine you haven't eaten since your shift began." Maggie's stomach rumbled in agreement. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now. "Thank you. But you don't need to—" "Please," Alex interrupted. "It's the least I can do for your time." A waitress approached, and Maggie ordered a sandwich and tea, while Alex requested only black coffee. When they were alone again, he pulled out a small digital recorder. "Do you mind? It helps me keep details straight." Maggie shook her head, and he activated the device. "Now," he said, leaning forward slightly, "tell me everything you remember about the woman you saw. Start from the beginning." Maggie took a deep breath. "It was a Tuesday, I think, around 10 a.m. The morning rush had just ended, and I was refilling salt shakers when she came in. Blonde hair, shoulder-length, stylish clothes, not the kind we usually see in the diner. Designer handbag. What was she wearing, specifically?" Maggie closed her eyes, trying to picture it. A camel-colored coat, expensive-looking, boots, brown leather, and she had this scarf, a silk one with some kind of pattern, blue and gold. Alex's breath caught. "That sounds like the Hermes scarf I gave Eliza for her birthday." Encouraged, Maggie continued. She seemed agitated, looking over her shoulder, checking her watch. She didn't order anything, just asked if she could use our phone because hers was dead. I let her use the one at the counter. "Did she say who she was calling?" "No. She just dialed and turned away for privacy. The call was short, less than a minute. When she hung up, she seemed even more upset. She thanked me and left quickly." "Did you see which direction she went? Or if she got into a car?" Maggie shook her head. "I went back to work. The next time I looked outside, she was gone." She hesitated, then added, "There was one thing, though. When she was on the phone, I heard her say something like, 'He found out. I have to move now.' It stuck with me because she sounded scared." Alex's face paled. "He found out," he repeated softly. The waitress returned with their orders. Maggie waited until she left before asking, "Do you know what she might have meant?" Alex was silent for a long moment, turning his coffee cup slowly on the saucer. "There are things about Eliza's disappearance that haven't been made public," he finally said. "Things that complicated the investigation." "Like what?" He hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share. "Eliza came into my life 3 years ago. She was brilliant, beautiful, mysterious in ways that intrigued me. Our relationship progressed quickly." A shadow crossed his face. Perhaps too quickly in retrospect. "You think she was hiding something?" "I know she was. A week before she disappeared, I found documents in our apartment. A passport with a different name, bank statements for accounts I knew nothing about. When I confronted her, she broke down. Told me she'd been living under an assumed identity, running from someone from her past." His hands clenched around the coffee cup. "She promised to tell me everything that weekend. We never got to have that conversation." Maggie's sandwich lay forgotten as she absorbed this. So when she said he found out, she could have meant the person she was running from, Alex finished. Or she could have meant me, discovering her secrets. Pain flashed across his face. "The police initially suspected I might have been involved in her disappearance, that I might have harmed her after learning she wasn't who she claimed to be." "But you were cleared?" Maggie asked hesitantly. "Yes. I had an alibi, and there was evidence she left our apartment voluntarily. Besides, paralysis makes one a less convincing suspect for kidnapping." There was a bitter edge to his words as he gestured to the wheelchair. "The accident," Maggie said. "The article mentioned you were injured while pursuing leads." Alex's mouth tightened. "That's the official story. The truth is more complicated. I received a text, supposedly from Eliza, asking me to meet her. When I arrived, someone ran me off the road. The police believe it was a setup that whoever has Eliza wanted me out of the picture too. But you survived." "Yes, with a spinal cord injury that the doctors assure me is temporary." His tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. The important thing is that your information confirms Eliza was alive and free to move about after her initial disappearance. That gives me hope." Maggie felt a sudden wave of doubt. "Mr. Whitaker, I should be clear. I'm not absolutely certain it was your fiancé I saw. I just thought, if there was a chance—" "Call me Alex," he said, his expression softening. "And any lead is better than none at this point. The police investigation has stalled. They believe Eliza simply ran away from her past and from me. But I know something happened to her, something beyond her control." The conviction in his voice was compelling. Despite her reservations, Maggie found herself wanting to help this man find answers. "What can I do?" she asked. Alex studied her for a moment, as if making a decision. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a small, glossy business card, different from the one he'd left at the diner. This one was embossed with gold lettering and a phone number different from the one on his corporate card. "This is my private number," he said, sliding it across the table. "I've hired a team of investigators, former FBI private security specialists. If you remember anything else or if the woman returns to the diner, call me directly, day or night." Maggie took the card, the weight of responsibility suddenly heavy on her shoulders. "I will." Alex glanced at his watch. "I've kept you long enough. Let me arrange a car to take you home." "That's not necessary," Maggie protested. "I can take the bus. It's nearly 8 and the temperature is dropping." His tone brooked no argument as he pulled out his phone. "Where do you live?" Reluctantly, Maggie gave him her address, uncomfortably aware of the contrast between his world and hers. As they waited for the car to arrive, an awkward silence fell between them. Maggie fidgeted with her napkin, suddenly very conscious of her worn uniform, her chipped nail polish, the overall aura of struggling to make ends meet that defined her existence. "Why did you decide to tell me about seeing Eliza?" Alex asked suddenly. "You could have ignored it, gone on with your life." The question caught Maggie off guard. I lost someone too. My mother. Not the same way, but..." She swallowed hard. "If there was even a small chance I could help, I had to try." Alex's expression softened. "Thank you, Maggie, truly." Outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. "Your ride," Alex said, gesturing toward it. As Maggie stood to leave, she hesitated. "I hope you find her," she said simply. "So do I," Alex replied, the weariness returning to his eyes. "More than anything." The driver held the door for Maggie, and she slid into the plush leather back seat, the luxury almost overwhelming after a day on her feet. As the car pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Alex sitting alone at the cafe table, staring into his untouched coffee, the weight of his missing fiancée visible in the slump of his shoulders. Maggie couldn't have known then that this was just the beginning, that the simple act of compassion she had shown would pull her deeper into a mystery more complex and dangerous than she could imagine, changing not only her life but Alex's as well, in ways neither of them could possibly foresee. The luxury car dropped Maggie off at her rundown apartment building, the contrast between the vehicle and her surroundings stark enough to draw curious stares from neighbors lingering outside. She hurried up the 4 flights of stairs, her mind still processing the conversation with Alex. To her surprise, Jen was home, sprawled on their second-hand couch watching reality TV, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table. "Well, look who's finally home," Jen said, raising an eyebrow. "And arriving in style, no less. Since when do you take private cars?" Maggie shrugged off her jacket. "It's a long story." "I've got time," Jen replied, muting the television. "And it must be good if it involves black sedans with tinted windows." With a sigh, Maggie sank into the armchair across from her roommate. As much as she wanted to keep the situation private, she needed to talk to someone about it. And despite their differences, Jen was the closest thing to a friend she had these days. "Remember that guy in the wheelchair who came into the diner yesterday?" she began. Jen's eyes widened as Maggie recounted the story. Alexander Whitaker, his missing fiancée, Maggie's recollection of the frightened blonde woman. When she finished, Jen let out a low whistle. "Holy shit, Mags. You've stumbled into some real-life crime drama." She leaned forward, suddenly serious. "But are you sure you want to get involved? Rich people's problems have a way of getting messy." "I'm not really involved," Maggie insisted. "I just told him what I saw." "And gave him your address and took his private number," Jen pointed out. "Sounds involved to me." Maggie frowned. What was I supposed to do? Ignore it? What if that woman really is in danger? That's for the police to figure out, not some waitress making minimum wage. Jen took a swig of wine directly from the bottle. "Besides, didn't you say he was cleared as a suspect? What if he actually did something to her and the cops just couldn't prove it?" "You didn't see his face when he talked about her," Maggie said quietly. "He's devastated. Whatever happened to her, I don't think he was responsible." Jen shrugged. "Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. Men like that, rich, powerful, they're used to getting what they want." She picked up the remote. "Anyway, there's leftover Chinese in the fridge if you're hungry." As Jen returned her attention to the TV, Maggie retreated to her bedroom, Jen's warnings following her like an unwelcome shadow. Was she being naive? She barely knew Alexander Whitaker. His wealth and status existed in a world completely separate from hers. And yet, there had been something in his eyes, a rawness, a vulnerability that seemed impossible to fake. She placed his private business card on her nightstand, staring at the elegant gold lettering. Then, almost as an afterthought, she snapped a picture of it with her phone, just in case. The next morning, Maggie woke to an email notification from her bank. Her account was overdrawn by 30 $42s. Her chest tightened with familiar anxiety. She'd been careful with her spending, but the automatic withdrawal for her monthly student loan payment had gone through earlier than expected. "Perfect," she muttered, calculating how many extra shifts she would need to request to cover the overdraft fees. As she dressed for work, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Alexander Whitaker. Would you be available to meet again today? I have additional questions about Eliza." Maggie stared at the message, Jen's warnings echoing in her mind. But the overdraft notice loomed larger. If nothing else, perhaps he'd buy her another meal, saving her the cost of dinner. "I work until 4 today," she texted back. "Could meet after." His response came immediately. "I'll send a car at 4:15. Same cafe as yesterday?" Maggie hesitated, then replied, "That works." Throughout her shift, Maggie found herself watching the door, half expecting Alex to appear. He didn't, though several times she caught herself studying blonde women who entered, wondering if any might be the mysterious Eliza. Greta noticed her distraction. "Everything okay, Collins? You seem jumpy today." "Just tired," Maggie lied, forcing a smile as she refilled a customer's coffee cup. At precisely 4:15, as Maggie stepped outside after clocking out, the same black sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver, a stoic man in his 50s, opened the door for her without a word. This time, Alex was already at the cafe when she arrived, reviewing documents spread across the table. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he said, gathering the papers and slipping them into a leather portfolio. "Of course," Maggie replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Have there been any developments?" Alex gestured to the waitress for coffee before answering. "My security team followed up with local businesses near the diner. A convenience store across the street has exterior cameras. They've been reviewing the footage from the day you believe you saw Eliza." Hope surged in Maggie's chest. "And? Did they find her?" "The footage quality is poor, but there's a woman matching Eliza's description leaving the diner at approximately the time you indicated." He pulled a grainy printout from his portfolio and slid it across the table. "Is this the woman you saw?" Maggie studied the blurry image. A slender blonde woman hurrying down the sidewalk, her face partially obscured as she looked over her shoulder. The quality was terrible, but there was something familiar in the posture. The coat. "It could be," she said cautiously. "I can't be 100% sure, but the clothing matches what I remember." Alex nodded, taking back the image. "It's more than we had before." The camera also captured her getting into a car, a dark sedan with tinted windows. "We couldn't make out the license plate, but it's another lead." He paused as the waitress delivered their coffee. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet. I'd like you to come to my office to speak with my security team directly. They have methods for enhancing memory recall that might help you remember more details." Maggie wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, buying time to think. "What kind of methods?" "Nothing invasive," Alex assured her. "Cognitive interview techniques mostly. Questions designed to help you access memories you might not realize you have." She hesitated. "I'm not sure I have anything else to offer. I've told you everything I remember." "Often we observe more than we consciously process," Alex said, leaning forward slightly. "Especially in service jobs, where you're trained to notice details about customers. You might have seen something critical without realizing it." Maggie considered this. He had a point. She often remembered customers' orders from days earlier or noticed when regular patrons wore new clothes or changed their hairstyles. Perhaps she had observed more about the blonde woman than she realized. "When would this be?" she asked. "Now, if you're available. My office is downtown, about 20 minutes from here." The sudden request caught her off guard. I'm not really dressed for an office visit." She gestured to her diner uniform, embarrassed by the coffee stain on the sleeve. Alex waved away her concern. "No one will care what you're wearing, Maggie. This isn't a formal meeting." She thought of her empty refrigerator, her overdrawn bank account, the rent increase looming at the end of the month. Is there compensation for my time?" The question felt awkward, mercenary even, but necessity overrode pride. If Alex was offended, he didn't show it. "Of course, your time is valuable. We can discuss appropriate compensation once we determine how helpful your information might be." It wasn't a firm commitment, but it was enough of a possibility to tip the scales. "All right," Maggie agreed. "I can come now." Whitaker Industries occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of downtown. The security desk in the lobby was staffed by men who looked more like military personnel than receptionists, their scrutiny making Maggie acutely aware of her worn uniform and scuffed shoes. Alex, however, moved through the space with practiced ease, nodding to the guards who scrambled to assist him with doors and elevator access. In his wheelchair, he somehow projected more authority than most people managed standing at full height. The executive floor was a study in understated luxury. Muted tones, original artwork on the walls, plush carpeting that swallowed the sound of footsteps. Alex led her to a conference room where 3 people were already waiting. A stern-looking woman in her 40s with close-cropped gray hair, a younger man with the alert posture of someone with military training, and an older gentleman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Maggie, this is my security team," Alex said. "Victoria Reeves, former FBI, James Chen, ex-military intelligence, and Dr. Howard Kane, a specialist in cognitive interviewing techniques." Maggie shook hands with each of them, trying not to feel intimidated. These people operated in a world completely foreign to her, a world of high-stakes investigations and corporate security. "Please sit," Dr. Kane said, gesturing to a chair. "Would you like water, coffee, tea?" "Water would be fine," Maggie replied, settling into the offered seat. Victoria Reeves studied her with analytical eyes. "Mr. Whitaker tells us you may have been one of the last people to see Eliza Bennett before she disappeared completely." "I don't know if it was actually her," Maggie clarified, "but the woman I saw matches her description, and the timing fits." "That's what we're here to determine," Dr. Kane said gently. "With your permission, I'd like to guide you through some memory recall exercises. They're completely non-invasive, simply questions designed to help you access details you might not realize you observed." Maggie nodded, and for the next hour, she found herself transported back to that morning at the diner. Dr. Kane's voice was soothing, his questions specific but not leading. Did the woman have any jewelry? Did she check her watch? Was she carrying anything besides her purse? Which hand did she use to dial the phone? Did she speak with an accent? Was anyone watching her from outside? To Maggie's surprise, details emerged that she hadn't consciously registered. A distinctive watch with a blue face, a small scar near the woman's right eyebrow, the nervous way she had twisted a ring on her finger while making the call. A ring? Alex interrupted, the first time he'd spoken during the interview. What kind of ring? Maggie closed her eyes, trying to picture it. It was unusual. Not a typical engagement ring. More like a signet ring, I think. Gold, with some kind of dark stone or emblem. Alex and Victoria exchanged a significant look. Eliza doesn't wear rings, he said quietly. She has an aversion to them, a childhood trauma involving a ring catching on something and injuring her finger. She wouldn't even accept a traditional engagement ring. We had matching bracelets made instead. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. So it wasn't her, Maggie said, disappointment washing over her. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Not necessarily, James Chen spoke up, his voice sharper than the others. It could mean she's assumed yet another identity. New accessories would be part of that. Dr. Kane made a note on his pad. Maggie, can you recall anything else about the phone call itself? Any specific words or phrases? Maggie frowned in concentration. She said he found out, like I mentioned before, and something about having to move. Then, I think she said something like, the arrangements are made. The deposit box has everything you'll need. Victoria leaned forward. Deposit box? Are you certain those were her words? I think so. It stuck out because it sounded, I don't know, spy movie-ish. Safety deposit box, Alex muttered. Banks? Storage facilities? We'll look into it, Victoria assured him before turning back to Maggie. Anything else? Any mention of locations, names, times? Maggie shook her head. That's all I can remember. I'm sorry. You've been extremely helpful, Dr. Kane said warmly. More than you realize. As the interview concluded, Victoria and James excused themselves to follow up on the new information, leaving Maggie with Alex and Dr. Kane. You mentioned compensation, Alex said, pulling out his phone. Would $5,000 be appropriate for your time today? Maggie's jaw dropped. 5,000? The amount was staggering, enough to clear her overdrawn account, pay next month's increased rent, and still have plenty left over. Is that not sufficient? Alex asked, genuinely confused by her reaction. No, it's more than sufficient, Maggie stammered. It's extremely generous. You've provided valuable information, Alex said matter-of-factly. If you'll give me your banking details, I can have it transferred immediately. Still in shock, Maggie provided her account information. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification of the deposit. We may need to speak with you again as the investigation progresses, Alex continued. Would that be acceptable? Of course, Maggie agreed, still reeling from the unexpected windfall. Anything I can do to help. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Kane pulled Maggie aside. Ms. Collins, I should warn you, involvement in cases like this can sometimes have unexpected consequences. If you experience any unusual attention or feel unsafe in any way, please notify Mr. Whitaker immediately. A chill ran down Maggie's spine. Do you think I'm in danger? Dr. Kane's kind eyes turned serious. Probably not, but in situations where people disappear under mysterious circumstances, it's best to be cautious, especially now that you've formally connected yourself to the investigation. With that sobering warning, Maggie found herself back in the black sedan, being driven home in silence. As the car navigated the evening traffic, she stared at her bank account balance on her phone screen, the substantial sum feeling both like a blessing and a burden. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, could she extricate herself if things became dangerous? As the car pulled up to her apartment building, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that in helping Alexander Whitaker search for his missing fiancée, she had crossed a threshold from which there would be no easy return. Maggie woke the next morning feeling as if she'd dreamed the entire previous day. But the notification from her banking app confirmed reality. $5,000 sat in her account, transforming her financial situation overnight. She lay in bed for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, simultaneously relieved and uneasy. The money solved immediate problems. She could pay her overdrawn fees, cover next month's increased rent, make a dent in her mother's medical bills, and still have enough left for a small cushion. Yet Dr. Kane's parting warning lingered, casting a shadow over the windfall. She showered quickly, the water hotter than usual, a small luxury she typically avoided to keep the utility bill down. When she emerged from the bathroom, Jen was in the kitchen, eyeing her suspiciously. "You look different," her roommate said, pouring coffee. "Something happened with wheelchair CEO?" Maggie hesitated, then decided honesty was simplest. "He paid me for helping with his investigation. A lot, actually." Jen's eyebrows shot up. "How much is a lot?" $5,000. Coffee sloshed over the edge of Jen's mug. "Holy shit, Mags! For answering some questions? Are you sure he doesn't expect other services?" "It's not like that," Maggie said firmly. "He's desperate to find his fiancée, and I provided information that might help, that's all." $5,000 is still excessive, Jen persisted. "Nobody pays that much unless they want something." Maggie sipped her own coffee, uncomfortable with Jen's implication. "I'm going to use it to pay off some of Mom's medical bills and cover our rent increase." Jen's expression softened slightly. "Well, at least some good is coming out of this weird situation." She paused. "Just be careful, okay? Rich people live by different rules." "I know," Maggie assured her, though in truth she understood very little about Alexander Whitaker's world. After Jen left for her retail job, Maggie spent the morning handling finances, paying the overdraft, setting aside money for rent, and making a payment on her mother's most aggressive medical collection. She also transferred $500 to her savings account, the first time in years she'd had anything to save. With these practical matters addressed, she turned her attention to her neglected coursework. She had an accounting exam the following week, and falling behind in her studies would only perpetuate the cycle of financial insecurity she was trying to escape. Maggie had just settled at her desk when her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "New developments. Are you working today?" Her heart rate quickened. "Off today. Catching up on schoolwork," she replied. "Could you come to my home office this afternoon? Car can pick you up at 2? Maggie hesitated. Going to Alex's office had been one thing, a professional environment with other people present. His home felt more intimate, potentially crossing a boundary. "Is it something we could discuss by phone?" she texted back. 3 dots appeared as he typed, disappeared, then reappeared. "Would prefer in person. Security concerns. Victoria and James will be present." The presence of his security team reassured her. "Okay, 2 is fine." Setting aside her textbooks, Maggie changed from sweatpants to jeans and a simple blue sweater, her nicest casual outfit. At precisely 2 p.m., her phone buzzed with a notification that her car had arrived. This time, the sedan took her to an exclusive high-rise overlooking the park. A doorman escorted her to a private elevator that opened directly into a breathtaking penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased panoramic city views, while modern art adorned walls in a space that somehow managed to be both minimalist and luxurious. "Ms. Collins," Victoria Reeves greeted her, appearing from a hallway. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Whitaker is in his study." Maggie followed the security expert through the apartment, noting the lack of personal touches. No family photos, no mementos, The space resembled an upscale hotel suite more than a home. Alex's study was different. Here, signs of actual life existed. Books stacked on a side table, a half-empty coffee mug, family photos on the desk. Alex sat behind a large glass desk, his wheelchair positioned to face both the door and the windows. James Chen stood at a digital board displaying photos, timelines, and maps. "Maggie, thank you for coming," Alex said, gesturing to a chair. "Something significant has happened." "You've found Eliza?" Maggie asked hopefully. "Not exactly," James interjected, "but we've confirmed that the woman you saw at the diner was her." Victoria handed Maggie a tablet displaying a much clearer image than the blurry security footage she'd seen previously. This was captured by an ATM camera half a block from the diner. "It's definitely Eliza." Maggie studied the image. The woman's face was clearly visible as she glanced over her shoulder. It was the same blonde who had used the diner's phone. "So my information was helpful," Maggie said, feeling a small surge of satisfaction. "Extremely," Alex confirmed. "It's the first confirmed sighting since her disappearance. But there's more." He nodded to James, who tapped the digital board, bringing up a series of bank records. "Based on your recollection of Eliza mentioning a deposit box, we've been investigating financial institutions," Victoria explained. "This morning we discovered she accessed a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown the day after you saw her at the diner." "How did you find that out?" Maggie asked, then immediately regretted the question. "Never mind. I probably don't want to know." A ghost of a smile crossed Victoria's face. "Let's just say we have resources." "The point is," Alex continued, "we now know she was alive and moving freely at least a day after her official disappearance. And she was preparing for something, retrieving items from a safety deposit box held under a name we weren't previously aware of." "What name?" Maggie asked. "Sarah Caldwell," James replied. "We're looking into the identity now, but preliminary research suggests it's another alias." Alex wheeled himself closer to Maggie. "This is where you come in again. We need to visit this bank, speak to employees who might have seen her. Your presence could be valuable. A civilian face might elicit more cooperation than my security team." Maggie shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure how I could help. I'm not an investigator." "People talk to you," Alex said simply. "It's part of your job. You notice things others miss." He paused. "Of course, you would be compensated for your time." The offer of more money was tempting, but Maggie felt a growing unease about her deepening involvement. "I have classes to study for, and my shift at the diner tomorrow." "I understand," Alex interrupted, though disappointment flashed across his face. "This isn't your problem to solve." Victoria and James exchanged glances, and Victoria cleared her throat. "Miss Collins, there's something else you should know. After your interview yesterday, we conducted a standard security sweep, routine procedure when civilians become involved in sensitive investigations." Maggie tensed. "A security sweep of what?" "Your background, your movements, your associations," Victoria said matter-of-factly, "and we found something concerning. The morning after you first met with Mr. Whitaker, a vehicle with tinted windows was parked near your apartment building. The same vehicle was observed outside the diner during your shift yesterday." A chill ran down Maggie's spine. "Someone's watching me?" "We can't confirm that," James said, "but the timing is suspicious. It could be coincidence, but in our line of work, we don't believe in coincidences." "What James is trying to say," Alex interjected, "is that by helping me, you may have inadvertently placed yourself on someone's radar. If there are people looking for Eliza, people who mean her harm, they might see you as a potential lead." Maggie's throat went dry. "So I might be in danger?" "As a precaution, we've already arranged security for you," Victoria assured her. "Discreet but effective. You've been under protection since yesterday evening." The realization that unknown people had been watching her, both Whitaker's security and possibly others with more sinister intentions, made Maggie's skin crawl. You should have told me this sooner. We're telling you now, Alex said gently. And it's precisely why I'm asking for your continued help. The sooner we find Eliza, the sooner any potential risk to you dissipates. Maggie stood abruptly. I need some air. Alex nodded, and Victoria escorted her to a balcony overlooking the city. The fresh air helped clear Maggie's head, but the height, 30 floors up, only emphasized how far she'd strayed from the familiar boundaries of her life. I understand this is overwhelming, Victoria said, maintaining a respectful distance. But Mr. Whitaker isn't exaggerating the situation. Eliza Bennett is involved in something dangerous. The fact that she's managed to stay hidden this long suggests she has resources and skills beyond what a typical person possesses. Who is she, really? Maggie asked. Not the woman Alex fell in love with, but the person she was before. Victoria's expression remained neutral. That's what we're trying to determine. The Sarah Caldwell identity appears to have been established 7 years ago, but we believe that's not her original identity either. And you think I can help find her? I think you already have, Victoria replied. Whatever you decide about further involvement, we'll maintain your security detail until we're certain there's no threat to you. When they returned to the study, Alex was reviewing documents on his tablet, his forehead creased in concentration. He looked up as they entered. I apologize for overwhelming you with this, he said sincerely. It wasn't my intention to drag you into a complicated situation. Something in his voice, a blend of determination and vulnerability, resonated with Maggie. Despite her reservations, she found herself reluctant to abandon him in his search. If I help you with the bank, she said cautiously, what exactly would I need to do? Relief washed over Alex's face. Simply accompany us, observe interactions, perhaps engage bank employees in conversation. Your perspective as someone who's actually seen Eliza recently could prove invaluable. When would this happen? Tomorrow morning, James answered. Banks are less busy then, and key personnel are more likely to be available. Maggie thought of her morning shift at the diner, the accounting exam she needed to study for. Then she thought of the mysterious car watching her apartment, the possibility that she was already entangled in this situation whether she wanted to be or not. I'll need to call in sick to my shift, she said finally. I'll compensate you for the lost wages, Alex offered immediately. That's not necessary, Maggie replied, though the practical part of her knew it would help. I just want to find Eliza and end this. For both your sakes. After finalizing details for the following day, Maggie found herself back in the black sedan, headed home with more questions than answers. The city passed by outside the tinted windows, people going about their normal lives, unaware of the bizarre situation she'd stumbled into. Back at her apartment, she found Jen sprawled on the couch watching TV. How was study day? Her roommate asked without looking up. I didn't get much studying done, Maggie admitted. I need to call in sick tomorrow. Something's come up. This caught Jen's attention. The rich guy again? It's complicated, Maggie said, not wanting to worry her roommate with talk of mysterious cars and security details. Complicated is code for trouble, Jen replied, muting the TV. What's really going on, Mags? Maggie sank into the armchair, suddenly exhausted. I'm helping Alex, Mr. Whitaker, follow a lead about his fiancée. We're going to a bank tomorrow. A bank? Why would he need you for that? It's a long story. Jen studied her face. You're not telling me everything. I can't, Maggie said. Partially because I don't fully understand it myself. For once, Jen didn't push. Just be careful, okay? And text me tomorrow so I know you're alive. It's not that dramatic, Maggie protested, though she wasn't entirely convinced. That night, sleep eluded her. Every passing car, every creak in the old building had her on edge, wondering if it was Whitaker's security team or someone more sinister. Around midnight, she got up and peered through the blinds at the street below. A dark sedan was parked across the street, a silhouette barely visible in the driver's seat. protection or threat? At this point, she couldn't be sure. Her phone buzzed with a text. All secure. Try to get some sleep. V. Victoria Reeves, somehow aware that Maggie was awake and checking the street. The knowledge that she was being watched so closely was both reassuring and disturbing. Maggie returned to bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, her mind racing with questions. Who was Eliza Bennett, really? What was she running from? And why did Maggie feel increasingly certain that by trying to help find her, she was entangling herself in something far more dangerous than she'd initially imagined? Just before drifting off to sleep, another thought occurred to her. What if Eliza didn't want to be found? What if in helping Alex, she was betraying a woman who had valid reasons for disappearing? These unsettling questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where blonde women with changing faces ran through endless corridors, always looking over their shoulders, always one step ahead of those who pursued them. Morning came too quickly. Maggie had barely managed a few hours of fitful sleep before her alarm jolted her awake at 6. She'd set it early to give herself time to call the diner and prepare for whatever the day might bring. Greta was predictably displeased about Maggie calling in sick. This is the third schedule change you've requested this week, Collins. I'm running a business here, not a drop-in center. I know, and I'm sorry, Maggie said, injecting as much misery into her voice as possible. It's just this stomach bug. Save it, Greta interrupted. Just be here tomorrow, on time and ready to work, or don't bother coming back at all. The line went dead. Maggie stared at her phone, a new anxiety blossoming. She couldn't afford to lose her job, even with Alex's generous payment. That money would disappear quickly between rent, her mother's medical bills, and school expenses. Besides, diner work was reliable in a way that helping a wealthy CEO track down his missing fiancée most certainly was not. At 7:30, a text from James Chen arrived. Car arriving at 8:15. Business casual attire if possible. Maggie surveyed her limited wardrobe with a critical eye. Business casual wasn't exactly within her budget. She settled on black pants that were mercifully free of stains, a blue button-down shirt that had belonged to her mother, and her one pair of decent shoes. It wasn't elegant, but it would have to do. The black sedan arrived precisely on time. Victoria Reeves sat in the front passenger seat, turning to greet Maggie as she slid into the back. "Good morning," Victoria said, her tone brisk but not unfriendly. "Sleep well?" "Not really," Maggie admitted. "Understandable. We'll meet Mr. Whitaker at the bank." Victoria handed back a slim tablet. "This contains background information on First National Bank and the employees we're likely to interact with. Take a few minutes to familiarize yourself." Maggie scrolled through profiles of bank managers and senior tellers, trying to memorize names and faces. What exactly is my role here? Observation and soft interaction, Victoria replied. These people are more likely to speak freely with someone they perceive as harmless. Your presence also lends legitimacy to our inquiries, makes us seem less intimidating. So I'm the friendly face, Maggie surmised. Precisely. First National Bank was an imposing structure of marble and glass in the financial district. As they approached, Maggie spotted Alex already waiting outside, his wheelchair positioned near the entrance. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, his dark hair neatly combed, looking every inch the powerful CEO he was. "Good morning," he greeted them, his eyes lingering on Maggie a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming?" "What's our approach?" Victoria asked as James joined them from where he'd been scouting the perimeter. "We've scheduled a meeting with the branch manager, Margaret Zhao," Alex explained. "The official reason is that I'm considering moving some of Whitaker Industries' accounts to First National." As they entered the bank, Maggie was struck by the hushed atmosphere of wealth. The gleaming floors, the tasteful artwork, the respectful murmurs of employees and customers conducting transactions that likely involved sums she could barely imagine. A polished young man in a sharp suit approached immediately. "Mr. Whitaker, welcome to First National. Ms. Zhao is expecting you. Please follow me." They were led to a private conference room where a woman in her 50s with an impeccable bob and pearl earrings waited to greet them. "Mr. Whitaker." "It's an honor," Margaret Zhao said, extending her hand first to Alex, then to the others. "I understand you're considering First National for your corporate banking needs." "I'm exploring options," Alex replied smoothly. "These are my associates, Victoria Reeves, James Chen, and Maggie Collins from our Customer Relations Department." Maggie tried not to react to her sudden promotion as they settled around the conference table. Victoria and James maintained professional smiles, while Zhao launched into a presentation about the bank's services and security features. Alex listened attentively, asking occasional questions about international transfers and privacy policies. Then, as if it were merely an afterthought, he said, "Your safety deposit facilities are quite secure, I understand. My fiancé mentioned using them recently." Zhao's smile didn't waver. "Yes, our vault is state-of-the-art. We pride ourselves on both security and discretion." Eliza was quite impressed, Alex continued casually. "She mentioned a helpful employee. I believe the name was Marcus?" A flicker of recognition crossed Zhao's face. "Marcus Reynolds, perhaps. He oversees our private banking services." "That sounds right," Alex agreed. "Is he available today? I'd like to commend him personally." "I believe he's on the floor. I can check if he's free." As Zhao stepped out to locate Marcus, Victoria leaned forward. "Well played," she murmured to Alex. "Let's see if it bears fruit," he replied, his expression guarded. Minutes later, Zhao returned with a tall man in his 30s, sandy-haired, clean-shaven, with an easy smile that revealed perfect teeth. "Mr. Whitaker," Marcus Reynolds said, shaking hands, "it's a pleasure. Ms. Zhao mentions you're considering our services?" "Yes, though first I wanted to thank you personally for assisting my fiancée recently, Eliza Bennett. She mentioned how helpful you were with her safety deposit box access." A brief confusion crossed Marcus's face before it cleared. "Ah, Miss Bennett, of course." His eyes darted to Zhao, then back to Alex. "Happy to have been of service." Maggie noticed the hesitation. He was lying. He didn't remember Eliza, or at least not under that name. Alex seemed to notice too. "She can be quite memorable," he pressed. "Blonde hair, blue eyes. She visited about 2 weeks ago." "We assist many clients, Mr. Whitaker," Reynolds replied diplomatically. "But yes, I recall Ms. Bennett now. Very pleasant lady." Victoria smoothly interjected, "Mr. Reynolds, while we're discussing vault access, perhaps you could give Ms. Collins a brief overview of your safety deposit procedures. She's updating our corporate security protocols." "Of course," Reynolds agreed, seeming relieved to change the subject. "Ms. Collins, would you like to step out to my office?" Maggie nodded, following Reynolds' lead while shooting a nervous glance back at Victoria, who gave a barely perceptible nod of encouragement. Reynolds' office was small but elegant, with certificates on the wall and a single photograph of a golden retriever on his desk. "Please, have a seat," he offered. "What specifically would you like to know about our safety deposit protocols?" Maggie adopted what she hoped was a professional demeanor. "Well, I'm particularly interested in how you verify identity for access. Mr. Whitaker is quite concerned about security." "As he should be," Reynolds agreed. "We have a multi-step verification process. ID check, signature verification, biometric scan, and of course the client's personal key which pairs with our master key." "And this was the process Ms. Bennett went through?" Reynolds hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Ms. Collins, may I speak frankly?" Maggie's pulse quickened. "Of course. I don't recall assisting anyone named Eliza Bennett." He lowered his voice. "The woman I assisted with vault access that day identified herself as Sarah Caldwell. She had all the proper documentation and authentication. If this is the same person Mr. Whitaker is referring to, then there may be some discrepancy in the information she provided to different parties. Maggie feigned surprise. "I see. That's concerning. I don't mean to cause alarm," Reynolds added quickly. "Identity verification is our highest priority. Ms. Caldwell's, or Ms. Bennett's, documentation was impeccable." "What time of day did she access the vault?" Maggie asked, trying to sound casual. "Early, right after opening, around 9 a.m. "And did she seem anxious at all?" Reynolds studied Maggie with newfound suspicion. "These questions seem beyond the scope of security protocols, Ms. Collins." Maggie backpedaled. "I'm sorry, it's just Mr. Whitaker mentioned she wasn't feeling well that day, and I wondered if it was noticeable." "She seemed perfectly composed," Reynolds replied, his tone cooling. "Now, is there anything else about our security measures you'd like to discuss?" Recognizing the conversation was over, Maggie shook her head. Reynolds escorted her back to the conference room, where the others were wrapping up their meeting with Zhao. "Thank you for your time," Alex was saying. "You've given us much to consider." Outside the bank, they waited until they were safely in the car before discussing what they'd learned. Reynolds confirmed she used the Sarah Caldwell identity, Maggie reported. He said she came early in the morning and appeared completely composed. "He was lying about not remembering her," James observed. "His micro-expressions showed recognition when you first mentioned a woman accessing the vault." "The question is, what did she remove from the safety deposit box?" Victoria mused. "And where did she go afterward?" Alex added, his expression troubled. The car took them to a small private restaurant where Alex had reserved a secluded table. Over lunch, the kind of upscale meal Maggie typically only saw when serving others, they pieced together what they knew. "Sarah Caldwell established an account at First National 3 years ago," Victoria reported, reading from her tablet. "Safety deposit box was rented 6 months later. Contents unknown, but box size suggests documents, jewelry, perhaps cash. 3 years ago is when Eliza came into my life," Alex noted, his voice tight with emotion. "She must have been planning this for a long time." "Planning what, though?" Maggie asked. "To disappear?" "Or to disappear with something valuable," James suggested. Alex shook his head. "Eliza had access to my accounts, my properties. If she wanted money or assets, there were easier ways than this elaborate vanishing act." "Unless what she wanted wasn't money," Victoria said quietly, "but information." A heavy silence fell over the table. "What kind of information?" Maggie finally asked. Alex's expression darkened. "Whitaker Industries specializes in security systems and communications technology. Many of our clients are government agencies, military contractors." "You think Eliza was after corporate secrets?" Maggie couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. The idea seemed too much like a spy movie plot. "I don't know what to think anymore," Alex admitted, running a hand through his hair in a rare display of frustration. "The woman I loved, or thought I loved, is becoming more of a stranger with each discovery." Maggie felt a pang of sympathy. Whatever Eliza's reasons, Alex's pain was genuine. "What's our next move?" James asked, redirecting the conversation. "We need to access that safety deposit box," Victoria stated. "See if she left anything behind that might indicate where she went." "The bank won't allow that without a court order," Alex said. "And obtaining one would take time we don't have, plus create a paper trail that might alert whoever Eliza is running from or working with." Victoria and James exchanged a look that made Maggie distinctly uncomfortable. "There are other ways," James said carefully. Alex shook his head. "Nothing illegal. I won't cross that line." "Then we're at an impasse," Victoria concluded. "Unless—" All eyes turned to Maggie, who shifted uncomfortably under their collective gaze. "Unless what?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. "Reynolds responded to you," Victoria said. "He shared information he probably shouldn't have. With a bit more time, the right approach—" "You want me to pump him for information?" Maggie said flatly. Just conversation, Alex clarified quickly. Nothing inappropriate or dangerous. But he might be more forthcoming with you than with us. Maggie thought of Greta's warning, her classes, the life she was struggling to build, a life that had nothing to do with missing fiancés and mysterious safety deposit boxes. "I can't," she said finally. "I'm sorry, but I have a job, classes, Joe. I can't get any more involved than I already am." Disappointment flashed across Alex's face, but he nodded. "I understand. You've already done more than we had any right to expect." The rest of the meal passed in awkward conversation. When they finished, Alex insisted on having the driver take Maggie directly home, despite her protests that she could use public transportation. "It's safer this way," he said simply, "until we're certain there's no threat to you." As the car pulled away from the restaurant, Maggie caught a glimpse of Alex watching her departure, his expression unreadable. She told herself the heaviness in her chest was just anxiety about her job, her studies, the complications this adventure had introduced to her life. It had nothing to do with the wounded look in Alex's eyes when she'd refused to help further, or the genuine pain he clearly felt over Eliza's betrayal. Nothing at all. When the car stopped outside her apartment building, Victoria turned to face her from the front seat. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice," she said. "This situation is more complex than it appears, and you have your own life to consider." "Thanks," Maggie replied, though the words did little to ease her conflict. "We'll maintain surveillance for another 48 hours, just to be safe," Victoria continued. "After that, you can return to normal life and forget this ever happened." Somehow, Maggie doubted it would be that simple. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd already crossed a point of no return. That normal life, whatever that had been, was no longer an option. The next morning, Maggie returned to the diner as if nothing had happened. She donned her faded uniform, tied back her hair, and slipped into the familiar rhythm of orders, coffee refills, and customer small talk. Greta watched her with narrowed eyes but said nothing about her absence the previous day. By mid-afternoon, the normalcy almost convinced Maggie that the entire experience with Alexander Whitaker had been some bizarre dream. Almost, but not quite. The memory of his face when she'd refused to help further haunted her, and she found herself glancing at the door whenever it opened, half expecting to see him wheeling himself in. "You're distracted today," Luis commented as they restocked napkin dispensers during the afternoon lull. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," Maggie replied automatically. It had become her standard response lately. "Well, heads up. Greta's on the warpath. The supplier shorted us on coffee beans again." Maggie nodded gratefully for the warning and redoubled her efforts to stay focused. Her shift ended at 7, and she hurried to catch the bus to campus for her evening accounting class. As she settled into a seat, she checked her phone for the first time in hours. 3 missed calls and a text from an unknown number. "Need to speak with you urgently. A.W." Her heart rate quickened. Despite her resolve to extricate herself from Alex's investigation, she found herself typing a response. "In class until 9. What's happened?" The reply came immediately. "New information about possible danger. Call when you can." The vague message left her anxious and distracted throughout class. The professor's lecture on depreciation calculations barely registered as Maggie's mind spun with possibilities. What new information? What danger? And was Alex contacting her because she was still somehow involved, or because she herself might be at risk? By the time class ended, her nerves were frayed. She found a quiet corner of the campus courtyard and dialed Alex's number. "Maggie," he answered on the first ring. "Thank you for calling back. Your message was concerning," she said, cutting to the chase. "What's going on?" "There's been a development. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Are you still on campus? I can have a car there in 10 minutes. Maggie hesitated. She had promised herself, and Jen, that she was done with this situation. Yet curiosity and concern propelled her forward. "I'll be at the main entrance." The now familiar black sedan appeared precisely 10 minutes later. This time, Alex himself waited in the back seat, his expression grave in the dim interior lighting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said as she slid in beside him. "I wouldn't have contacted you if it wasn't important." "What's happened?" Maggie asked, buckling her seatbelt as the car pulled away from the curb. Alex handed her a tablet displaying what appeared to be a police report. "This was filed this afternoon. Marcus Reynolds, the bank employee we spoke with yesterday, was attacked in the parking garage of his apartment building last night." Maggie's blood ran cold as she scanned the report. Is he all right?" "Hospitalized with a concussion and broken ribs. The attack was disguised as a robbery, but nothing was taken. Not his wallet, not his watch, not his car." "You think it's connected to our visit? To Eliza?" "It's too coincidental to ignore," Alex said grimly. "Especially considering this." He swiped to the next document, a preliminary police statement indicating that before losing consciousness, Reynolds had mentioned something about the woman from the bank and the people asking questions. "Oh God," Maggie whispered. "We did this?" "Not intentionally," Alex said, his voice tight. "But yes, our inquiries appear to have put him in danger, which means you could be at risk as well." The car was heading downtown, away from both campus and her apartment. "Where are we going?" "A secure location where we can talk freely. Victoria and James are meeting us there." He hesitated. "I understand if you want nothing further to do with this situation, Maggie, but given the circumstances, I felt you needed to be informed of potential risk." Maggie stared out the window at the passing cityscape, her thoughts racing. "Do you think whoever did this knows about me? That I was there at the bank?" "It's possible," Alex admitted. "Reynolds could have mentioned you during the attack, or someone could have been monitoring the bank and seen you with us." The implications settled heavily on Maggie's shoulders. She had classes, work, a life that had been complicated enough before Alexander Whitaker wheeled into the diner. Now she was potentially in danger because of a woman she'd never really met and a mystery she had no stake in solving. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript office building. Alex guided her to a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. "One of Whitaker Industries' satellite offices," he explained as they ascended. "More secure than my home or our main headquarters." The elevator opened directly into a modernistic space that resembled a command center from a spy movie. Multiple screens displaying data feeds, sophisticated equipment humming quietly, and Victoria and James already waiting, their expressions somber. "Ms. Collins," Victoria acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" Maggie asked more sharply than she'd intended. "There are always choices," Victoria replied evenly, "though sometimes none of them are particularly attractive." James gestured to a conference table where documents and laptops were arranged. "We've been compiling everything we know about Eliza, or whoever she really is. The attack on Reynolds confirms our suspicion that her disappearance involves dangerous people." "What I don't understand," Maggie said, taking a seat, "is why anyone would care about a bank employee who helped her access a safety deposit box. What could possibly be so important?" "That's what we've been trying to determine," Alex said, wheeling himself to the table. The timing of Eliza's disappearance coincided with a significant corporate development at Whitaker Industries, the final testing phase of a new communication encryption system we developed for defense applications. "You think she was after that?" Maggie asked. "Corporate espionage?" "It's a theory," Victoria confirmed, "one that became more plausible after we found this." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph of Eliza, or someone who looked remarkably like her, with different hair and makeup, standing next to a man in military uniform. The timestamp indicated it was taken 6 years ago. "Her name in this photo isn't Eliza Bennett or Sarah Caldwell," James explained. "According to military records, she's Catherine Mercer, administrative assistant to General Howard Rayburn, who oversaw several classified defense contracts. Catherine Mercer's employment record ends abruptly 5 years ago, Victoria continued. She supposedly resigned for personal reasons and dropped off the grid. No credit card activity, no social media, no rental agreements or property purchases, until Sarah Caldwell emerged 2 years later. Maggie studied the photograph, recognizing the bone structure and eyes despite the different styling. So she worked for the military, disappeared, became Sarah Caldwell, then reinvented herself again as Eliza Bennett to get close to you? She asked Alex. Pain flashed across his face. That appears to be the case. But why? What would she gain by becoming your fiancé? Access, James said bluntly. Mr. Whitaker has security clearances and connections that would be valuable to certain foreign interests. The encryption system I mentioned would be particularly valuable. It represents a significant advancement over current technologies. The implication hung heavy in the air. If James was right, Eliza hadn't just broken Alex's heart. She had systematically insinuated herself into his life to commit espionage against the United States. This is way beyond my pay grade, Maggie muttered, feeling overwhelmed. If this is about national security, shouldn't the FBI or someone be handling it? They are, Victoria assured her. We've been coordinating with federal authorities, but there are complications. Such as? Alex sighed. Such as the fact that I'm not entirely convinced Eliza is the villain in this scenario. Victoria and James exchanged glances that suggested this was a point of contention. You believe the woman who apparently lied about her identity multiple times, then disappeared with sensitive information, might be innocent? Maggie couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. I believe there's more to the story, Alex insisted. The night before she disappeared, Eliza was different, agitated, afraid. She said something that didn't make sense at the time. She said, "Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we should fear most." She could have been preparing you for her disappearance, Victoria suggested, not for the first time based on her tone. Laying groundwork for sympathy. Or she could have been trying to warn me, Alex countered. What if she wasn't working against American interests but discovered someone who was? What if she's running not because she's guilty but because she knows something dangerous? The theory wasn't entirely implausible, Maggie had to admit. It would explain why Eliza had appeared frightened at the diner, why she had said he found out during her phone call. Either way, James interjected, Reynolds's attack changes the calculus. Whatever is happening involves people willing to commit violence. Which brings us to why we needed to speak with you tonight, Ms. Collins. Victoria pulled out another file. We've arranged for temporary relocation and security for you. A furnished apartment in a secure building, transportation to work and classes, and a security detail that will maintain discreet surveillance. Maggie blinked. You want me to move? Just like that? It would be the safest option, Alex said quietly. Just until we resolve this situation. And how long might that take? Maggie demanded, her voice rising slightly. Days? Weeks? I have a life, responsibilities. I can't just disappear into some safe house indefinitely. Your regular routines can continue, Victoria assured her. You'll simply be doing them from a more secure home base, with professionals ensuring your safety. Maggie stood, pacing the sleek office. This was madness. A week ago, her biggest concerns had been making rent and passing her accounting exam. Now she was discussing safe houses and security details like a character in a thriller novel. What about Jen, my roommate? We can arrange protection for her as well, though it would be simpler if she believed you were simply staying with a friend for a while, James replied. Maggie laughed humorlessly. Simpler, right? She turned to Alex. This is crazy. You know that, right? This entire situation is completely insane. His blue eyes met hers, filled with regret and something else, a determination that hadn't been there when they first met. The weeks of searching for Eliza had hardened something in him. I know it's a lot to ask, he said softly. But I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because you helped me." The sincerity in his voice gave her pause. This wasn't just about finding Eliza anymore. It was about protecting innocent people caught in the crossfire. "How would this work exactly?" she asked, not quite agreeing but not refusing outright. Victoria outlined the arrangement: a luxury apartment in a building with 24-hour security, private transportation, a generous stipend for any inconvenience, and a direct line to their team at all times. She would be expected to maintain normal routines to avoid raising suspicion, but would do so under watchful eyes. "What about my job at the diner?" Maggie asked. "Greta's already threatened to fire me if I miss another shift." "Perhaps it's time for a better employment opportunity," Alex suggested. "Whitaker Industries has several openings that would pay significantly more and offer more flexible hours for your studies." Maggie shook her head firmly. "No, that's too much. I'm not going to completely upend my life and become dependent on you. The temporary housing and security maybe, but I keep my job and my independence." Alex nodded, respecting her boundary. "Of course. Whatever makes you most comfortable." Comfortable was hardly the word Maggie would use to describe any of this, but she recognized the genuine concern behind the offer. And if she was honest with herself, the thought of returning to her apartment knowing the people who had attacked Reynolds might be watching her was terrifying. "I'll need to get some things from my apartment," she said finally, "and talk to Jen." "We can arrange that," Victoria confirmed. "One of our team can accompany you, just as a precaution." As they finalized details, Maggie found herself watching Alex. Despite his composed exterior, she could see the toll the past weeks had taken. The shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands occasionally trembled slightly on the armrests of his wheelchair. He was a man whose life had been shattered not just by the disappearance of the woman he loved, but by the realization that their entire relationship might have been a calculated deception. Yet he still worried about her safety, about the bank employee who'd been hurt, about doing the right thing. There was a fundamental decency there that touched Maggie more deeply than she wanted to admit. Later, as a female security operative named Rachel accompanied her to pack essentials from her apartment, Maggie tried to make sense of her conflicted feelings. Part of her resented being pulled into this dangerous situation. Another part felt a growing investment in finding the truth. Not just for Alex's sake, but to understand why her simple act of kindness in the diner had led to such extraordinary consequences. What she couldn't explain, even to herself, was the flutter of anticipation she felt at the thought of working more closely with Alex. A man who, despite his wealth and status, seemed to value her insights and respect her boundaries in ways few others had. As she zipped her duffel bag closed, Maggie pushed these confusing thoughts aside. What mattered now was staying safe and finding answers. Everything else, especially inappropriate feelings for a man still searching for his missing fiancée, would have to wait. The temporary apartment made Maggie's shared rental look like a storage closet by comparison. Located on the 14th floor of a luxury high-rise, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and a kitchen with appliances she was afraid to touch. The bathroom alone was larger than her bedroom at home, with a rainfall shower and soaking tub that under different circumstances would have been pure bliss. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, setting her duffel bag on the pristine white bedspread. "I'm a waitress, not a witness protection case." But as she unpacked her meager belongings, the worn jeans and t-shirts looking out of place in the spacious closet, a part of her couldn't help but appreciate the safety and comfort this temporary sanctuary offered. Jen had taken the news of her sudden relocation surprisingly well. "Secret rich boyfriend, huh?" she'd teased, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. "About time you had some excitement in your life." Maggie hadn't bothered correcting her. The truth was too complicated, and Jen's assumption provided a simple explanation for her absence. She'd promised to cover her share of the rent, assuring Jen it was only for a couple of weeks at most. Now, standing alone in the silent luxury of her temporary home, Maggie felt like an imposter. She checked her phone. She had promised to let Victoria know when she was settled. There was also a text from Alex. "Everything all right with the apartment? Let me know if you need anything." His concern touched her, though she tried not to read too much into it. To him, she was still just a witness, a civilian who'd become accidentally entangled in his search for Eliza. "All settled in," she texted back. "The place is excessive, but thank you." His response came immediately. "Excess is my specialty, unfortunately. Try to get some rest. Car will pick you up for your morning shift at 5:30. Maggie set an alarm, though she doubted she'd sleep much. The events of the past week swirled in her mind like leaves caught in a whirlwind. The blonde woman at the diner, Alex's search, the attack on Reynolds, the revelation of Eliza's multiple identities. It was like being dropped into the middle of a spy novel without having read the first chapters. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion eventually claimed her. The luxurious bed didn't hurt either, cradling her body in a way her lumpy mattress at home never could. She slept deeply until her alarm jolted her awake at 4:45 a.m. The promised car delivered her to the diner 15 minutes before her shift. The driver, a taciturn man who introduced himself only as Deacon, reminded her to text when her shift ended so he could collect her. Greta raised an eyebrow when Maggie arrived early but made no comment. The morning passed in its usual blur of orders and coffee refills, though Maggie found herself studying each customer more carefully than before, wondering if any might be watching her for reasons beyond service. During her break, she checked her phone to find a missed call from Victoria and a text asking her to call back when possible. She stepped into the alley behind the diner, the cold air a shock after the warm kitchen. "What's happened?" she asked when Victoria answered. "Reynolds is awake and talking," Victoria replied without preamble. "He's confirmed our suspicions. The attack was directly related to our inquiries about Sarah Caldwell." "Did he say who attacked him?" "Professional job, he thinks. 2 men who knew exactly what they were after. They kept asking what he'd told us about the woman and what he knew about the contents of her safety deposit box." A sick feeling settled in Maggie's stomach. "Did he tell them about me? That I was there?" "He doesn't think so, but he was in and out of consciousness during the attack. He can't be certain." The implication hung heavy between them. "There's more," Victoria continued. "We've been digging deeper into Catherine Mercer's background. Before working for General Rayburn, she was briefly employed by a private defense contractor called Nexalon. They specialize in advanced weapons systems." "What does that mean for finding Eliza?" "It means her skills and connections would be incredibly valuable to certain parties. The question remains whether she's selling those skills or running from someone who wants to exploit them." Maggie leaned against the cold brick wall, trying to process this information. "So we still don't know if she's a victim or something else?" "Correct. Mr. Whitaker would like to meet with you this evening to discuss next steps. He's found something that might interest you." "I have class tonight," Maggie reminded her. "He's aware. He can meet you afterward, around 9:30. The back door of the diner opened, and Luis peered out. "Break's over, Collins. Rush is starting." "I have to go," Maggie told Victoria. "Tell Alex I'll meet him after class." The rest of her shift passed without incident, though Maggie couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Was it just paranoia born from Reynolds' attack? Or were there actually eyes tracking her movements? The security team Alex had assigned would be monitoring her too, which added another layer of unsettling scrutiny. After work, Deacon drove her to campus for her evening class. The familiar routine of lectures and note-taking provided a welcome distraction, though Maggie found herself seated closer to the door than usual, alert to any unusual movements or unfamiliar faces. At 9:25, as students packed up their belongings, she received a text from Alex. "Outside main entrance, black SUV." The vehicle was larger than the sedan she'd become accustomed to, with tinted windows and what looked like reinforced panels. Alex sat in the back, a laptop open on a fold-down table in front of him. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as she slid in beside him. "How are you holding up?" "Considering I'm living in a luxury apartment with round-the-clock security because people might want to kidnap or kill me over a woman I barely met." "Just peachy," Maggie replied, surprising herself with the humor in her voice despite the circumstances. A smile touched Alex's lips. "Your resilience is remarkable." "Not resilience, survival instinct. I've spent most of my life adapting to whatever gets thrown at me." She gestured to the laptop. "Victoria said you found something?" Alex nodded, turning the screen toward her. "We've been retracing Eliza's movements after she left the diner. The car she got into was a rental paid for with cash under the name Sarah Caldwell. It was returned to an airport location the following day." "She flew somewhere?" "No flight records match any of her known aliases, but..." He pulled up security footage from what appeared to be a bus terminal. This was captured at the Greyhound station downtown approximately 3 hours after the car was returned. Maggie leaned closer, examining the grainy image. A woman wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses stood at a ticket counter, her blonde hair tucked up into the hat. Despite the disguise, the profile was unmistakable. "That's her," Maggie confirmed. "Where was she going?" "The ticket was for Charleston, but we don't think that was her final destination. More likely, she was creating a false trail." Maggie studied the image more carefully. "Wait, is that—" She pointed to a small logo visible on the side of the woman's bag. "That looks like the symbol from Uptown Cafe on 8th Street. They put those stickers on all their to-go orders." Alex quickly zoomed in on the detail, which would have been easy to miss. "You're right. Good catch." He made a call, speaking rapidly to someone, presumably Victoria or James, about checking security footage near the cafe from that morning. "Your observational skills continue to impress," he said after hanging up. "That's exactly the kind of detail that could help us track her movements." Maggie shifted uncomfortably under his praise. "It's nothing. When you work in food service, you notice other establishments' branding." "It's not nothing," Alex insisted. "Most people, even trained investigators, wouldn't have spotted that." The SUV was moving through the nighttime streets, though Maggie hadn't heard Alex give the driver any destination. "Where are we going?" she asked. "A secure location. There's something else I want to show you." 20 minutes later, they pulled into an industrial area near the waterfront. The driver parked inside a nondescript warehouse where James Chen was waiting alongside several computers and monitoring equipment. "Everything's ready," James informed Alex as they entered. "Though I still think this is premature." "Noted," Alex replied coolly, his tone making it clear the decision wasn't up for debate. Maggie looked between them. "What's premature?" Alex wheeled himself to a computer station. "I received this email 2 hours ago. It came through an anonymous rerouting service that makes it impossible to trace." He pulled up an email with no subject line and a single line of text. "The answer is in the garden where it all began. E." "From Eliza?" Maggie asked, her pulse quickening. "She contacted you?" "It appears so, though we can't verify the sender's identity with absolute certainty." "What does it mean? What garden?" Alex's expression grew solemn. "The first time I took Eliza to dinner was at the garden room at the Westbrook Hotel. It's where our relationship began." "You think she's there? At the hotel?" "Not Eliza herself," James interjected. "But possibly something she left for Mr. Whitaker to find. A message, information, or a trap," Maggie concluded, understanding James's reservation. "That's why he thought this was premature. You're planning to go there, aren't you?" Alex nodded. "Tonight. The restaurant is closed on Mondays for maintenance. Minimal staff, less public exposure if it is a setup. And you're telling me this because I'd like you to come with me." Maggie blinked in surprise. "Why? I'm not security, not an investigator. I'd just be in the way." "You see things others miss," Alex said simply. "Like the cafe logo just now. You notice details, particularly about Eliza, that have repeatedly proven valuable." And, he hesitated, you're the last person known to have spoken with her before she fully disappeared. There might be a connection. It's too dangerous, James argued. If this is a trap, then your team will be there to protect us, Alex cut in. The decision to go is mine. The decision to join me, he turned to Maggie, is yours. Maggie weighed her options. The rational choice was clearly to decline, to stay safely in her luxury apartment and let professionals handle the investigation. But curiosity pulled at her, along with something else she wasn't ready to name, a growing investment in Alex himself, in helping him find answers, in seeing this strange journey through to its conclusion. If I agree, she said slowly, I want a guarantee that at the first sign of trouble we leave, immediately. Absolutely, Alex agreed. Your safety is non-negotiable. James sighed, recognizing defeat. I'll assemble the team. We'll need surveillance on all entries and exits, plainclothes personnel inside, and a direct extraction plan. As he moved away to make arrangements, Alex turned to Maggie. Thank you. I know this goes far beyond anything you signed up for. I didn't sign up for any of this, she reminded him with a wry smile. But at this point I want answers too. Alex studied her face. It's more than that though, isn't it? You want to help her, Eliza, even though you don't know her. Maggie considered this. I want to understand why she ran, what she's afraid of, whether she's victim or villain. And yes, if she's in danger, I want to help her. She paused. I also want to help you find closure, whatever that looks like. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the unusual bond that had formed through these extraordinary circumstances. The moment was broken by James returning with a tactical plan outlined on a tablet. As he walked them through the security arrangements, Maggie wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. She was a waitress and part-time student, not a character in a spy thriller. She had no training for this kind of situation, no special skills beyond an eye for detail. Yet here she was, preparing to visit a luxury hotel restaurant after hours to search for clues left by a woman with multiple identities who might be a victim running for her life or a spy stealing national secrets. How had her life taken such a surreal turn? And more importantly, where would it lead? As they finalized plans for the midnight excursion, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited them at the garden room would change everything. Not just for Alex's search for Eliza, but for Maggie herself. The Westbrook Hotel was a monument to old-world luxury. All marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and staff who seemed to glide rather than walk. Even at midnight, the grand lobby maintained an air of hushed opulence, though the usual crowd of wealthy guests and business travelers had thinned to just a few night owls lingering over drinks in the lobby bar. Maggie felt profoundly out of place as she entered beside Alex, acutely aware of her simple jeans and sweater amid such splendor. Alex, in contrast, looked perfectly at home, nodding to the night manager who rushed to greet him with the deference reserved for frequent and generous patrons. Mr. Whitaker, a pleasure to see you again, sir. How may I assist you this evening? Just a bit of nostalgia, Richard, Alex replied smoothly. I was hoping to show Miss Collins the garden room. I know it's closed for maintenance, but perhaps we could just peek in? Richard hesitated. Well, it's not our usual policy. Of course, Alex said, sliding what looked like $100 bill across the desk. We wouldn't want to inconvenience anyone, just a quick look for old time's sake. The night manager pocketed the bill with practiced discretion. I'll have security unlock it for you. Please take your time. The maintenance crew won't arrive until morning. As they followed Richard toward the elevators, Maggie spotted Victoria posing as a hotel guest reading in a plush armchair. Near the bar, James was disguised as a business traveler working on a laptop. Two other members of the security team, introduced earlier as Deacon and Mira, were positioned as a couple waiting for the elevator and a late-night cleaner, respectively. The garden room occupied the hotel's entire top floor, a stunning space with glass walls offering panoramic city views. During business hours, it would be an elegant restaurant, but tonight it stood silent and dimly lit, tables draped in white cloths like ghosts in the darkness. "I'll leave you to your reminiscing," Richard said after unlocking the doors. "Just call the front desk when you're finished, and someone will escort you down." Once he'd departed, Alex turned to Maggie. "We need to work quickly. Victoria thinks we have about 20 minutes before our presence here raises questions with hotel security." "What exactly are we looking for?" Maggie asked, gazing around the vast, elegant space. "Anything that seems out of place. Something Eliza might have left that would catch my attention but not be obvious to others." They split up, Maggie taking the main dining area while Alex headed toward the bar section. The room was eerily silent, their footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. Through her earpiece, a small device Victoria had insisted she wear, Maggie could hear periodic status updates from the security teams stationed throughout the hotel. "West entrance clear. Lobby secure. Maintenance staff accounted for." It was surreal, like being inside a movie she'd accidentally wandered onto the set of. Maggie moved methodically between tables, checking vases, looking under tablecloths, examining the few decorative elements that remained while the restaurant was closed. "Nothing seems out of place," she reported to Alex after 10 minutes of searching. He wheeled himself over from the bar area, frustration evident in the tight set of his jaw. "Nothing here either. Maybe I misinterpreted the message." Maggie leaned against a table, trying to think. "The garden where it all began. This is obviously the garden room, and it's where you had your first date, but..." She glanced around again. "Maybe it's more specific. Was there a particular table you sat at? Something significant that happened that night?" Alex's expression shifted as memory overtook him. "We sat by the windows, overlooking the river. Table 17. It was raining that night. The city lights reflected in the water. Eliza said it looked like the stars had fallen into the river." There was pain in his voice, the raw ache of someone remembering happiness that now felt like a cruel illusion. Maggie pretended not to notice as she moved toward the windows, identifying table 17 by its small numbered stand. As Alex joined her, she carefully examined the table setting, the silverware, the crystal glasses, the crisp napkins. Nothing seemed unusual. "The first time we met," Alex said quietly, she knocked over her wine glass. She was nervous, or pretending to be. The red wine spilled across the white tablecloth. On impulse, Maggie lifted the white cloth covering table 17. Beneath it, the table's surface was unmarked. She ran her fingers along the underside of the table, feeling nothing unusual. "Wait," Alex said suddenly. "Not the table, the chair." He pointed to one of the high-backed chairs. "That's where she sat." Maggie examined the chair carefully. At first glance, it looked identical to the others surrounding the table, plush velvet with ornate wooden legs. But as she ran her hand along the underside of the seat, her fingers encountered something that shouldn't have been there, a small object taped securely to the bottom. "I found something," she whispered, carefully detaching the item. It was a USB drive, small and nondescript, with no markings or labels. Maggie handed it to Alex, who turned it over in his palm, his expression unreadable. "We should go," he said, tucking the drive into his jacket pocket. "Now that we have what we came for, there's no reason to linger." As if on cue, Victoria's voice came through their earpieces. "We have movement. Hotel security approaching the elevator bank. Time to exit." "Alternative route?" Alex asked tersely. "Service elevator at the north end," James responded. "Mira is positioned there now. She'll guide you out." They moved quickly through the restaurant, following James's directions to a hidden service corridor. Mira, still in her cleaning staff disguise, held the service elevator for them. "Security just entered the garden room," Victoria reported as they descended. "They're doing a sweep. Someone must have alerted them to your presence." "Coincidence or concern?" Alex asked. "Unknown," came James's clipped reply. "But we're not taking chances. Extraction plan Charlie in effect." Maggie's heart raced as the elevator reached the ground floor. Instead of exiting through the lobby, Mira guided them through a maze of service corridors that smelled of laundry detergent and industrial cleaning products. "What's happening?" Maggie whispered to Alex. "Just a precaution," he assured her, though his tense posture suggested otherwise. "The timeline changed. We're adjusting." They emerged into an alley behind the hotel where a different vehicle than the one they'd arrived in waited, a modest sedan, rather than the distinctive SUV. Deacon was already in the driver's seat. "In, quickly," he ordered as they approached. Once they were settled in the back seat, Deacon pulled away, driving casually but with purpose. In her earpiece, Maggie could hear Victoria and James coordinating their own departures from the hotel. "Did something go wrong?" she asked once they were several blocks away. "Not necessarily," Alex replied, though his attention was on the side mirror, watching for any signs of pursuit. But the increased security activity was unexpected. Better safe than sorry. "Where are we going now?" "Somewhere secure to examine the drive." That somewhere turned out to be a nondescript office building downtown. Another Whitaker Industries satellite location, Alex explained. By the time they arrived, Victoria and James had also extracted safely from the hotel and joined them in a sterile conference room that looked more like a high-tech lab than a business space. "Isolated system," James explained, gesturing to a computer that sat unconnected to any visible network, in case the drive contains malware or tracking software. With careful precision, he inserted the USB drive they'd recovered. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single folder labeled simply Truth. "Password protected," James noted as he attempted to open it. "Any ideas, Mr. Whitaker?" Alex frowned in concentration. "Try stars in the river. No spaces." The folder remained locked. "What else was significant from that night?" Victoria prompted. "Anything she might have considered memorable or special?" Alex's face shadowed with the effort of revisiting memories that now felt tainted. "We talked about constellations. Her favorite was Cassiopeia." James typed it in, still locked. Maggie, who had been quiet since their arrival, suddenly spoke up. "What if it's not from your first date? What if the garden where it all began means something else entirely?" Alex looked at her curiously. "What are you thinking?" "When you first told me about Eliza, you mentioned she had secrets from her past, that she was running from someone. What if this has nothing to do with your relationship? What if the garden refers to where her troubles began?" A flash of understanding crossed Alex's face. "Catherine Mercer," he said quietly. "Before she became Sarah Caldwell. Before she was Eliza Bennett." "Garden," Victoria mused. "Could be a code name for an operation, a facility, or a person," James added. Gardner. "Try Rayburn," Alex suggested suddenly. "General Howard Rayburn, her former boss at the Defense Department." James typed in the name. The folder remained locked. "What about Nexelon?" Maggie suggested, remembering Victoria's earlier briefing. "The defense contractor she worked for before joining the military?" When James entered Nexelon, the folder opened immediately, revealing dozens of files, documents, photographs, and video clips. "She wanted you to make the connection to her past," Victoria observed. "Not your romantic history, but her professional one." James began scanning through the files, his expression growing more serious with each click. "Mr. Whitaker, you need to see this." The team gathered around the screen as James opened a document titled Project Sable. It contained technical specifications for what appeared to be an advanced weapons system, along with financial records showing payments to General Rayburn and several high-ranking officials at Nexelon. "These are bribes," Victoria said quietly. "Evidence of corruption." "And this," James added, opening another file, "looks like proof that Nexelon sold classified technology to foreign buyers, including countries under trade restrictions." Maggie watched Alex's face as understanding dawned. "She wasn't stealing secrets," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and new concern. "She was collecting evidence of treason. Which would explain why people are so desperate to find her. Victoria concluded. These documents implicate powerful individuals who stand to lose everything if this information becomes public. Alex's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, his knuckles white. She was trying to do the right thing. All this time she was trying to be a whistleblower. Or covering her own involvement, James cautioned. We don't know her role in all this yet. There's more, Victoria said, pointing to a video file. Look at the date stamp. It was recorded the day before she disappeared. With a sense of foreboding, Alex nodded for James to play it. The screen filled with Eliza's face, her blonde hair pulled back, her expression grave. She looked directly into the camera, and even through the recording, her fear was palpable. Alex, she began, her voice slightly distorted through the computer speakers. If you're watching this, then you found my message and you've seen the evidence. I'm sorry for disappearing, for all the secrets, for not trusting you with the truth from the beginning. She paused, looking over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. 3 years ago, I discovered that Nexalon was selling classified weapons technology to foreign governments. When I threatened to report it, they framed me as the leak. I had to run to create a new identity. Sarah Caldwell was born. Alex leaned closer to the screen, transfixed by her confession. I thought I was safe, that I'd left that life behind. Then I met you. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I never planned to fall in love, Alex. That part was real. But when I learned that Whitaker Industries was developing technology that Nexalon wanted, I realized they would try to use me to get to you. General Rayburn found me 2 weeks ago. He threatened to expose my past, to implicate you as an accomplice if I didn't help them access your new encryption system. Tears filled her eyes. I couldn't do it. I couldn't betray you. So I ran again. But this time, I took everything I needed to expose them. The evidence is all here, including recordings of their threats. It should be enough to clear my name and bring them to justice. Her expression hardened with determination. I can't come back yet. It's not safe. For either of us. They're watching you, and they'll kill anyone who helps me. I need to deliver this evidence to someone who can protect it and act on it. When it's done, if it's safe, I'll find you. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to a whisper. Trust Victoria. She has contacts who can help, but be careful who else you involve. Rayburn has people everywhere. The video ended abruptly, freezing on Eliza's concerned face. Silence fell over the room as they processed her revelations. Maggie glanced at Alex, saw the conflict of emotions playing across his features, relief that Eliza's love hadn't been a complete fabrication, worry for her safety, anger at having been kept in the dark. Can we verify any of this? He finally asked, his voice rough with emotion. James was already scanning other documents on the drive. Preliminary check shows the technical specifications match known Nexalon projects. The financial records appear authentic based on formatting and account numbers. It would take time to verify everything, but at first glance, the evidence seems substantial. She mentioned you specifically, Alex said to Victoria. Said you have contacts who could help. Victoria's expression remained professionally neutral, though Maggie thought she detected a flicker of surprise. I have colleagues in federal law enforcement who specialize in defense-related corruption cases. They could evaluate the evidence and determine next steps. Do it, Alex decided, but discreetly. If Eliza's right about Rayburn having people everywhere, we need to be careful who we trust. As Victoria stepped away to make calls, Maggie found herself studying the frozen image of Eliza on the screen. The woman looked nothing like the frightened blonde who had used the diner's phone that day. Her posture was different, her eyes harder, her voice more confident despite the fear she clearly felt. You believe her? Maggie asked Alex quietly. He nodded slowly. Yes. This is consistent with the woman I glimpsed sometimes, beneath the carefree persona she usually maintained. There were moments when her guard would drop, and I'd sense this weight she carried. His hand reached out, almost touching the screen before falling back to his lap. I just never imagined it was something like this. What happens now? We get this evidence to the right people, he said firmly, and we find Eliza before Rayburn does. The determination in his voice was unmistakable, as was the implied danger of the path ahead. Whatever safety Maggie might have hoped for by retrieving the USB drive had evaporated with Eliza's revelations. Instead of resolving the mystery, they had only scratched the surface of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military and corporate power. And based on the worried glances Victoria and James were exchanging, Maggie suspected the night's discoveries had put them all in far greater danger than before. Dawn was breaking by the time Victoria finished her calls. Maggie, who had dozed off in an office chair, startled awake when a cup of coffee appeared on the table before her. "You look like you need this," Alex said, a matching cup in his hand. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night pouring over the files Eliza had left them. "Thanks," Maggie mumbled, her mind foggy with exhaustion and information overload. "Any updates?" Alex nodded toward Victoria, who was ending her final call. As she joined them at the conference table, her usually composed expression was troubled. "My contact at the FBI is concerned," she reported. "The evidence appears legitimate, but General Rayburn has significant political protection. Moving against him will require absolute discretion and ironclad proof." "Which we have," Alex insisted, gesturing to the USB drive. "Which we have part of," Victoria corrected. "According to these files, Eliza compiled additional physical evidence, documents with original signatures, a recorded confession from a Nexelon executive that she was keeping separate from the digital files as insurance." James, who had been systematically analyzing the drive's contents, looked up from his computer. "There's a reference to a secondary package in one of the encrypted notes. No specifics on location, but it mentions the place where truth and fiction meet." "Another riddle," Maggie sighed. "She couldn't just leave an address." "She knew people might be watching," Alex reminded her, "or that the USB drive might be found by the wrong people. These oblique references were meant to make sense only to me." "So what does the place where truth and fiction meet mean to you?" Maggie asked. Alex frowned, considering. "There's a bookstore downtown, Threshold Books. Eliza and I went there often. They specialize in both historical nonfiction and literary fiction. The sections meet at the center of the store." "It's a start," Victoria said, "but we need to proceed with extreme caution. If Rayburn realizes we have this evidence, he'll do whatever it takes to neutralize the threat." "Neutralize," Maggie repeated. "That's a very clean word for something very dirty." Victoria didn't disagree. "Which is why you should stay here while we investigate the bookstore. This secure office is—" "No," Maggie interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'm coming too." "It's too dangerous," James objected. "I'm already in danger," Maggie pointed out. "You said it yourself. Once I became involved, I became a target. Besides, I've proven useful so far." "She has," Alex agreed, his eyes meeting Maggie's with something like respect. "And we're talking about a public bookstore in broad daylight. The risk is minimal." Victoria clearly disagreed but didn't argue further. "We'll use multiple vehicles, staggered arrivals. Ms. Collins, you'll enter with Mr. Whitaker as if you're simply customers. We'll maintain perimeter surveillance." The plan was executed with military precision. By 9 a.m., Maggie found herself browsing fiction titles at Threshold Books, a charming independent bookstore with worn wooden floors and floor-to-ceiling shelves. Alex moved through the history section nearby, both of them maintaining the appearance of casual browsing while scrutinizing every detail of the central area where the sections merged. "Anything?" Maggie murmured after 20 minutes of searching. Alex shook his head, frustration evident in the tight set of his jaw. They had examined every shelf, every display table, even the small reading nooks scattered throughout the store. Nothing seemed out of place or indicated a hidden package. Maggie's gaze wandered to the front counter where an elderly man with thick glasses and a cardigan was assisting a customer. What about the staff? Would Eliza have trusted someone here to hold something for her? Possibly, Alex considered. The owner, Mr. Vance, has run this place for decades. Eliza chatted with him regularly. As the customer left, they approached the counter. The old man looked up, his face brightening with recognition. "Mr. Whitaker, it's been too long. And how is Ms. Bennett? I haven't seen her in weeks." Alex managed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's actually why I'm here, Mr. Vance. Eliza may have left something for me to pick up." The bookseller's expression turned guarded. "I see, and this young lady is a friend," Maggie supplied, offering her hand. "Maggie Collins." Mr. Vance studied her face carefully before shaking her hand. "Any friend of Mr. Whitaker's," he said, though his tone suggested reservation. "Has Eliza been in recently?" Alex pressed. "About 2 weeks ago," Vance confirmed, still watching Maggie. "She seemed unsettled, not her usual self." "Did she leave anything for me?" Vance hesitated. "She said someone might come asking. Said I should be certain it was you, and that you'd be able to tell me what her favorite book in the store is." Alex didn't miss a beat. "The illustrated edition of The Secret Garden. She said it reminded her of childhood dreams she never got to fulfill." Something in the bookseller's demeanor relaxed. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into a back room. Maggie scanned the store while they waited, noting a young man who'd been browsing the same shelf since they arrived. Through the front window, she could see Victoria positioned at a cafe across the street, ostensibly reading a newspaper. Mr. Vance returned carrying a weathered leather-bound book. "She paid for this in advance, said you'd know what to do with it." Alex accepted the book, a collection of classical poetry, his fingers tracing the embossed cover. "Thank you for keeping it safe." As they turned to leave, the young man Maggie had noticed suddenly moved, reaching inside his jacket. Victoria's voice burst through their earpieces. "Armed suspect, north corner, exit immediately!" Everything happened at once. James appeared from between the shelves, placing himself between them and the approaching man. Mr. Vance ducked behind the counter. Maggie grabbed the handles of Alex's wheelchair, pushing him rapidly toward the rear exit Victoria had identified during their planning. Behind them, she heard James confronting the man, voices raised, then a sound like firecrackers, gunshots muffled by a silencer. "Go, go!" Victoria commanded through the earpiece as they burst through the back door into an alley. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside them, Deacon at the wheel. "Get in!" he shouted, throwing open the passenger door. Alex transferred himself into the vehicle with practiced efficiency, collapsing his wheelchair as Maggie scrambled into the back seat. Before she could even close her door properly, Deacon accelerated away from the bookstore. "James?" Alex demanded, clutching the book to his chest. "Engaging the threat," Victoria's tense voice replied in their ears. "We have a second team moving in. Continue to Extraction Point Alpha." Maggie's heart pounded as Deacon navigated through back streets, constantly checking mirrors for pursuit. Did that man shoot at us? In a bookstore? In broad daylight? "These people are desperate," Deacon said grimly, "and desperate people abandon caution." Alex opened the book, carefully examining its contents. Between the pages, he found a sealed envelope and a small data card, the kind used in high-end cameras. "This is it," he said quietly. "The secondary package." As Deacon drove, Alex opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and several photographs showing General Rayburn meeting with men whose faces had been circled in red ink. "Foreign arms dealers," Alex explained, recognizing some of the marked individuals. "And this one is Anton Veselov, a known intermediary for Russian intelligence." Before Maggie could respond, Victoria's urgent voice came through their earpieces. "We're compromised. Multiple hostiles. James is down." Alex's face paled. "Status? Alive but wounded. Police responding to shots fired. We can't stay here. The sound of running footsteps accompanied Victoria's words. New extraction plan. Safe House B. Are you being followed? Deacon checked the mirrors again. Negative. Street's clear. Proceed directly there. I'll meet you when I can. Trust no one else. Victoria's communication cut off abruptly. The gravity of the situation descended on Maggie like a physical weight. A man had been shot. James, who had placed himself in harm's way to protect them. They were being hunted by people willing to commit violence in public places. And now they possessed evidence that implicated a decorated general in treason. What's Safe House B? She asked, her voice barely steady. A property not connected to Whitaker Industries, Alex replied, securing the book and its contents in an inside pocket of his jacket. Off the books, known only to Victoria, James, and myself. Deacon drove for nearly an hour, taking a deliberately circuitous route through the city and suburbs until they reached a modest cabin on the outskirts of town. Surrounded by trees and set back from the nearest road, it offered both seclusion and strategic visibility of approaching vehicles. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well appointed, not luxurious like Alex's penthouse, but comfortable and equipped with modern security features. Deacon performed a thorough sweep before allowing them to fully enter. Perimeter sensors are active, he reported, checking a panel near the door. We'll have warning if anyone approaches within 100 yards. Alex wheeled himself to a secured cabinet, unlocking it to reveal communications equipment and several weapons. Maggie watched with a surreal sense of detachment as he checked and loaded a handgun before placing it on the table beside him. You know how to use that? She asked. Military school, followed by extensive private training, he replied without looking up. Before this, he gestured to his wheelchair. I was quite proficient. Maggie sank onto a nearby sofa, the adrenaline crash leaving her shaky and exhausted. What happens now? We wait for Victoria, Alex said. Then we get this evidence to her FBI contact. Once it's in official hands, Rayburn's political protection won't matter. Assuming we live that long, Maggie murmured, the reality of their situation finally hitting her full force. Oh God, my life was so normal a week ago. Alex wheeled closer, hesitating before reaching out to take her hand. I'm sorry I've brought this danger to your door, Maggie. None of this would have touched you if you hadn't tried to help me that day at the diner. The genuine remorse in his voice made her look up. His blue eyes held a depth of emotion she hadn't fully appreciated before, guilt, certainly, but also admiration and something more complex she couldn't quite name. I don't regret it, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I mean, I'm terrified and this is absolutely insane, but I don't regret helping you. His hand tightened around hers. You're extraordinary, you know that? Most people would have walked away at the first sign of trouble. I'm not most people, Maggie replied with a small smile. Just stubborn and apparently lacking in self-preservation instincts. The moment was interrupted by Deacon's sharp voice. Vehicle approaching, not Victoria's. Alex immediately tensed, retrieving the gun from the table. Maggie, there's a hidden room behind the pantry. Go there and don't come out unless you hear Victoria's voice or mine telling you it's clear. I'm not hiding while you two face whoever that is, she protested. This isn't a debate, Alex said firmly. Deacon and I are trained for this. You're not. The best thing you can do is protect yourself and the evidence. He removed the envelope and data card from his jacket, pressing them into her hands. Take these. If something happens to us, find a way to get them to the authorities. The gravity in his eyes brooked no argument. Maggie reluctantly took the items and followed his directions to the hidden room, a small, reinforced space equipped with emergency supplies and a secure phone line. As the hidden door closed behind her, plunging her into darkness except for a dim emergency light, Maggie pressed her ear against the wall, straining to hear what was happening in the main cabin. She caught fragments of tense conversation, the sound of the front door opening, then multiple voices. One of them, shockingly, she recognized, Victoria's. But something was wrong. Her tone was strained, unnatural. "No choice. Have to understand. They have my family." Alex's voice, sharp with disbelief. "Victoria, what are you saying?" A man's voice, cold and authoritative. "The evidence, Whitaker. All of it. Now." "I don't have it here." The unmistakable sound of a slap followed by Victoria's pained gasp. "Don't play games, Whitaker. We know you found the secondary package at the bookstore. My men saw you leave with it." Alex's voice, controlled but tight with anger. "General Rayburn, I presume. I've heard so much about you." Maggie's blood ran cold. General Rayburn himself was here, in the cabin. And Victoria had betrayed them. "Where's the girl?" Rayburn demanded. "The waitress. My sources say she's been with you every step of this investigation." "She's not involved," Alex insisted. "I sent her home once things got dangerous." "Search the property," Rayburn ordered someone. "She might have the evidence." Footsteps moved through the cabin, drawing closer to the pantry. Maggie backed away from the wall, clutching the envelope and data card, her mind racing. If they found her, the evidence would be lost, and there was no guarantee any of them would survive once Rayburn had what he wanted. The secure phone beckoned from the corner of the hidden room. But who could she call? The police would never arrive in time, and if Victoria had been compromised, who else in Alex's security team might be as well? As the footsteps paused just outside the pantry, Maggie made a desperate decision. She punched in the only number she could think of that might possibly help, the private number Alex had given her that first day, the one he'd said was directly connected to his executive office. As the phone rang, she heard someone begin to move items in the pantry, searching for the hidden entrance. She had seconds, at most, before she was discovered. Then, miraculously, a voice answered. Cool, professional, unfamiliar. "Whitaker secure line." "Please," Maggie whispered urgently. "I'm with Alex Whitaker. We're at a cabin outside the city. General Rayburn is here. He's going to kill us. We have evidence." The pantry shelves scraped against the floor as someone moved them. "Who is this?" the voice demanded. "Maggie Collins. Alex gave me this number weeks ago. Please, trace this call. Send help." The hidden door began to slide open, light spilling into her sanctuary. "He has the evidence," she whispered desperately into the phone. "Treason! Nexalon, please!" A man in tactical gear stood in the doorway, gun aimed directly at her. Behind him she could see Victoria's face, streaked with tears and a bright red mark where she'd been struck. "Found her!" the man called over his shoulder. "And she's holding something!" As the phone was wrenched from her hand and she was dragged from the hidden room, Maggie caught a glimpse of Alex, now held at gunpoint by another man while Rayburn stood before him, immaculate in his military uniform despite the brutality of the situation. The general's cold eyes assessed her, then the envelope and data card she still clutched. "Ms. Collins," he said with terrifying politeness, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." General Rayburn held out his hand expectantly, his eyes never leaving Maggie's face. "The evidence, Ms. Collins, now!" Maggie clutched the envelope and data card tighter, her gaze darting to Alex, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "I don't think so," she said, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed. "This proves you committed treason." Rayburn's pleasant expression didn't waver, though his eyes hardened. "Such a dramatic word. I prefer to think of it as strategic business development." He gestured to one of his men who pressed his gun more firmly against Alex's temple. "Let's not complicate matters. Hand over the materials or Mr. Whitaker dies first." Victoria stood nearby, her posture rigid, eyes filled with conflicting emotions. "Give him what he wants, Maggie," she said, her voice strained. "Please." "Don't," Alex countered. "Once he has it, we're all dead anyway." The tactical team member holding Maggie tightened his grip on her arm, causing her to wince. "I grow impatient," Rayburn said, checking his watch. "You have 3 seconds. 3, 2. Wait." Maggie extended the envelope with shaking hands. Take it. Just don't hurt him." Rayburn's lips curled in satisfaction as he accepted the materials, quickly examining the contents. "Wise decision, Ms. Collins, though ultimately futile." He nodded to his men. "Prepare them for transport. The cabin too. Clean it, then burn it." As one of the men moved to restrain her with zip ties, Maggie caught Victoria's eye. Something passed between them. A silent communication, a flicker of intent. Then several things happened in rapid succession. Victoria suddenly drove her elbow into the stomach of the man guarding her, simultaneously drawing a concealed weapon from her ankle holster. Deacon, who had been kneeling with his hands behind his head, launched himself at the nearest assailant. From outside, the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. In the chaos, Maggie dropped to the floor as instructed in the self-defense class she'd taken after her mother's illness, left her walking home alone at night. Alex, despite his wheelchair, managed to grab his attacker's gun arm, forcing it upward as a shot discharged into the ceiling. Rayburn, clutching the evidence, bolted for the door. Without thinking, Maggie lunged after him, tackling him around the knees. They both crashed to the floor, the envelope and data card skittering across the hardwood. "You little—" Rayburn snarled, striking Maggie hard across the face. Stars exploded in her vision as she fell back, tasting blood. The general scrambled for the scattered evidence, but before he could reach it, the cabin door burst open. Armed figures in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised, voices shouting commands that blended into an incomprehensible roar. Maggie curled into a protective ball as gunfire erupted around her. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. Seconds or minutes passed, she couldn't tell, before a strange silence fell, broken only by the throbbing of helicopter blades overhead. "Clear!" someone shouted. "Maggie!" Alex's voice tight with concern. "Maggie!" She uncurled slowly, blinking through tears and the throbbing pain in her cheek. The cabin had transformed into something from a war zone. Furniture overturned, bullet holes in the walls, bodies on the floor. Alex's wheelchair had been knocked over and he was dragging himself toward her with desperate determination. A figure knelt beside her, a woman in a tactical vest with an FBI insignia. "Ms. Collins, are you injured?" Maggie shook her head, then immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her skull. "Alex," she managed. "Is he—" "I'm here," he said, reaching her side. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye bleeding freely, but he was wonderfully, blessedly alive. "You called for help." "Your executive line," she confirmed, her voice shaky. "I hoped—" "It routes directly to our security division," he explained, "and they contacted the FBI." The female agent helped Maggie sit up. Around them, FBI personnel were securing the scene, checking bodies, collecting evidence. Near the door, Maggie spotted Rayburn, face down and motionless, the envelope he'd tried to steal just beyond his outstretched hand. "Victoria," Maggie suddenly remembered. "Where's Victoria?" Alex pointed across the room, where Victoria was receiving medical attention for a gunshot wound to her shoulder. Their eyes met across the space, and Victoria gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "She was playing along," Alex explained quietly. "When she realized her family had been taken as leverage, she contacted her FBI connections before coming here. She was buying time until they could mobilize." "And Deacon?" A shadow crossed Alex's face. "He didn't make it. He placed himself between Rayburn's men and Victoria when the shooting started." Fresh tears welled in Maggie's eyes. For Deacon, for James, who had been wounded at the bookstore, for all the lives torn apart by one man's greed and corruption. Alex reached for her hand, holding it tightly as FBI agents moved around them, documenting the scene and gathering evidence. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small in the aftermath of so much violence. "Now," said the female agent who had helped her, "you both give statements, receive medical attention, and let us do our job." The evidence you recovered will be crucial in prosecuting not only General Rayburn's associates but executives at Nexalon and others involved in the conspiracy." "And Eliza?" Alex asked. "Eliza Bennett, or Catherine Mercer, or whatever her real name is?" The agent's expression softened slightly. "We have reason to believe she's in protective custody with another agency. Once the immediate threat is neutralized, arrangements can be made for contact." Hours later, after medical examinations and preliminary statements, Maggie found herself in a quiet room at FBI headquarters. Her face had been cleaned and butterfly bandages applied to the cut on her cheekbone. The painkillers they'd given her had dulled the worst of the ache, leaving her in a strange, detached state, aware of the enormity of what had happened but somehow floating above it. When the door opened, she expected another agent with more questions. Instead, it was Alex, his own injuries treated, his wheelchair pushed by a somber-looking James, his arm in a sling but otherwise apparently recovered from the bookstore attack. "They're finishing up," Alex said, wheeling himself to her side once James had departed. "We can leave soon." "Leave to where?" Maggie asked, the question encompassing so much more than just their immediate destination. Where did one go after experiencing something like this? How did ordinary life resume? "Anywhere you want," Alex replied softly. "My home, your apartment, a hotel. You've earned the right to choose." Maggie considered this. "I think I'd like to go home. My real home, not the fancy apartment. I need something familiar right now." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. I'll arrange transportation. What about you? What will you do now?" Alex's gaze dropped to his hands, folded in his lap. "Wait to hear about Eliza. Help the FBI build their case. Begin the process of rebuilding my life, I suppose. Do you think—" Maggie hesitated. "When they find her, do you think you and she will—" "No," he said with quiet certainty. "Whatever Eliza and I had was built on necessary lies. Even if I can understand why she kept her secrets, there's no going back from that." He looked up, meeting Maggie's eyes directly. "Besides, recent events have shifted my perspective in unexpected ways." The unspoken implication hung between them, charged with possibility. Before either could continue, an agent appeared to inform them that they were free to go. A government car would take them wherever they needed, with the understanding that they would remain available for further questioning as the investigation proceeded. Outside, the night air felt cleansing after hours in the sterile FBI offices. As they waited for their car, Alex broke the silence. "I owe you more than I can ever repay, Maggie. You risked everything, your safety, your life, for someone you barely knew." Maggie shook her head. "Don't make me into something I'm not. I was scared most of the time. I wanted to run away." "But you didn't," he pointed out. "You stayed. You fought. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." The car arrived, a nondescript sedan rather than the luxury vehicles she'd grown accustomed to in Alex's company. As they pulled away from the federal building, Maggie watched the city lights blur through the window, feeling as though she were emerging from the most surreal dream. "Will you go back to the diner?" Alex asked after a comfortable silence. Maggie considered this. "I don't know. Serving coffee seems so ordinary now." She gave a small laugh, "Which is ridiculous because that's exactly what I am. Ordinary." "There's nothing ordinary about you, Maggie Collins," Alex said with conviction, "and after what you've been through, you deserve extraordinary options." "Like what?" "Like a full scholarship to complete your business degree, like a position at Whitaker Industries if you want it, or funding to start your own business, pursue whatever dreams you've had to set aside." Maggie turned to face him. "I don't need charity, Alex." "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's recognition of your capabilities. It's investing in someone I've come to greatly admire." His sincerity was unmistakable, warming her despite her instinctive resistance to accepting help. Still, she wasn't ready to make such decisions. not in the emotional aftermath of everything they'd experienced. "Can I think about it?" she asked, "after I've had some time to process everything?" "Of course," he agreed readily. "There's no rush." When they reached her apartment building, Alex insisted on accompanying her up the 4 flights of stairs, a journey made challenging by his wheelchair. One of the FBI agents who had followed as security detail offered to help, but Alex declined, navigating the steps through sheer upper body strength, a testament to his determination. At her door, they paused, the moment heavy with everything they'd shared and everything still unspoken. "Thank you," Maggie said simply, "for trusting me, for valuing my input when you had no reason to." "Thank you for seeing me," he replied. "Not the CEO, not the man in the wheelchair, just me." On impulse, Maggie leaned down and kissed his cheek, a gentle gesture of affection that could mean everything or nothing, depending on what came next. Alex caught her hand as she straightened, pressing it briefly to his heart. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. "Not as part of an investigation, not as compensation for your help, just dinner." Maggie smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like days. "I'd like that." As she unlocked her door, Alex added, "I should warn you, though, I tend to overtip. It's a character flaw." Her laugh echoed in the hallway, bright and unexpected. "I think I can live with that." Inside, the apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Small, somewhat shabby, but hers. Jen was out, based on the silence, probably with Tony. Maggie moved to the window, watching as Alex and his security detail returned to the car below. Before getting in, he looked up, as if sensing her gaze, and raised a hand in farewell. She returned the gesture, a strange peace settling over her despite the chaos of recent days. Whatever came next, whether she returned to the diner or accepted Alex's offer of education and opportunity, whether their relationship developed or remained a unique friendship forged in extraordinary circumstances, she knew she had changed irrevocably. The poor waitress who had once bought coffee for a stranger in a wheelchair had discovered reserves of courage and capability she never knew she possessed. She had helped expose corruption at the highest levels, had saved lives and evidence, had made decisions that mattered in the grand scheme of things. And perhaps most importantly, she had connected with someone who saw her true worth, not because she'd done him a kindness, but because he recognized in her something she was only beginning to see in herself. 3 months later, Maggie stood in front of Sunshine Diner one last time, having just worked her final shift. Her business classes were now full-time, funded by the Whitaker Foundation's Future Leaders Scholarship. She still lived in her apartment with Jen, still budgeted carefully, still took the bus most days, but the desperate edge of financial insecurity had been blunted, allowing her to focus on building the future she wanted rather than merely surviving the present. As she turned to leave, the bell above the door chimed. She looked back to see Greta watching her from the entrance. "You did good here, Collins," the older woman said gruffly, "and you'll do better out there." "Thank you," Maggie replied, touched by the rare compliment, "for everything you taught me." Greta nodded once, then disappeared back inside, leaving Maggie alone on the sidewalk with the late afternoon sun warming her face. She checked her watch, a simple but elegant timepiece that had been a gift from Alex on their 3rd date. She had exactly an hour to get home, shower, and change before he picked her up for dinner. They were meeting Eliza tonight, or Catherine, as she now insisted on being called. She had been in witness protection for months as the case against Rayburn's network was built, but with key arrests made and indictments secured, she had finally been allowed limited contact. Alex had requested this meeting, needing closure, and Catherine had agreed. Maggie wasn't entirely sure how she felt about witnessing their reunion. Part of her worried it might rekindle feelings Alex had insisted were extinct. But he had been adamant that he wanted her there, not just as support, but as an acknowledgement that his life had moved in a new direction. "You're the one who bought me coffee when I was searching for a ghost," he'd said. You're the one who helped me find the truth. You deserve to see this story end properly." As Maggie walked toward the bus stop, her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Thinking of you. Can't wait for tonight." She smiled, typing back, "On my way home now. See you soon." The simple exchange filled her with quiet joy. Their relationship was still new, still developing, but built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared experience that made it unlike anything she'd known before. A black sedan pulled up alongside her, not one of Alex's usual vehicles. The window rolled down to reveal Victoria, now fully recovered and reinstated as head of Whitaker Industries Security after being cleared of any wrongdoing in the Rayburn affair. "Need a ride?" she offered. Maggie hesitated only briefly before getting in. She and Victoria had developed an unlikely friendship in the aftermath of the cabin confrontation, bonded by the trauma they'd shared and the recovery that followed. "Nervous about tonight?" Victoria asked as they pulled into traffic. "A little," Maggie admitted. "It's strange to finally meet someone who's been so central to everything." Victoria nodded in understanding. "For what it's worth, I've vetted the meeting location thoroughly, and Catherine Mercer is cooperating fully with authorities. This is just tying up loose ends." "I know," Maggie said, watching the familiar streets of her city pass by. "It feels like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another." "That's usually how the best stories work," Victoria observed with a small smile. As they drove toward Maggie's apartment, she reflected on how a simple act of kindness, buying coffee for a stranger in a wheelchair, had altered the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. The journey had been dangerous, frightening, and at times overwhelming, but it had also been transformative, revealing strengths she hadn't known she possessed and opening doors she'd never dreamed would be available to her. Most importantly, it had brought Alex into her life, not as a wealthy benefactor or a ticket to a better existence, but as a partner who valued her for exactly who she was, a woman with courage, intelligence, and an unfailing instinct to do what was right, even when it was difficult. Whatever happened at dinner that night, whatever came next in their story together, Maggie knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't change a single moment of the path that had brought them here, from that first cup of coffee to whatever lay ahead. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.